A very good morning to you and welcome along to Friday's OTB AM. Adrian Barry with you as always on a Friday. Owen Sheehan has been given the day off. He's over in Manchester enjoying himself, is what's going on there. And I'm delighted to say John Duggan has taken the hot seat this morning. Good morning to you, John.
Adrian, good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. We're both bleary-eyed this morning for possibly slightly different reasons.
Yeah, I was looking at Brexit articles all night. I just got into Brexit for some reason recently.
You've already brought a level of intelligence to this
future.
conversation, John, that we don't normally get on a Friday.
Yeah, well, you have to bring a bit of highbrow to
Are you more concerned about your future having indulged in got knee deep in Brexit?
No, I think the EU will look after us. I think we'll be looked after.
Right.
And I think Leo Varadkar had a nice meeting with Macron yesterday, and this is really, really boring and nothing to do with sport. But
that's frequently what happens.
That's what I was doing last night after I came home from the late shift on Today FM. So, yeah, I wasn't watching the McGregor press conference.
Yeah, I was buzzing having watched the McGregor press conference.
Are you going to buy the whiskey?
In a pretty negative sort of way. The whiskey is one of the least things I have to say I'm outraged by. I think it's a very clever business thing to have done. So I don't know if people watched it last night. It was on supposed to start at 10, started at about 20 to 11 or thereauabouts. And he arrives into so Khabib comes on one side and McGregor comes on the other side, and he arrives in with that grin on his face and a nice bottle of whiskey as well. Proper
12, is it?
Number 12.
Something to do with his postcode, I think, is it?
Was that what it is? Right.
Yeah, I think it's the area he lives.
From Crumlin, yeah. So,
how did it rank in terms of McGregor press conferences and the annals of McGregor pantomime?
My take on the general press conferences is that it was total fakery, start to finish, was my take on it. It was absolutely contrived. And like they do tend to be in combat sports, they tend to be sort of, I can shout louder than you can, and we've got to drum up a bit. It's got to be, they're trying to make it the greatest pay-per-view event of all time, so they got to get that stuff going. And I get all of that, but it was just almost childish levels of acting. It was that bad. But the whiskey thing, I totally get and I totally understand, and they've signed some sort of a deal with the UFC that it's going to be on the canvas in the ring, and as he put it last night, Khabib's blood's going to be on the canvas as well. But fair play to him on the whiskey thing. I think that's super. Like,
that's
it's a really
marketing
good business idea. He's been working with a guy that I think still works for Bushmills or has worked for Bushmills, and was former Guinness as well, who knows his hops from his whiskies or whatever. And
no, you'd be curious about that part of it. I'm less curious about. Niall McGrath being later to espouse the virtues and the brilliance of UFC and all of that. Personally, it's not my thing, but
we're two old men shaking the fist at the sky, John. As well.
Yeah, I'm all into the pure hurling and the amateurism, but I respect what Conor McGregor's done in his career, but it's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, look, I'm not having a pop at the sport or any of that sort of stuff. I just thought last night, in that one instance, this entire thing was absolute fakery. And the other thing that kind of got me about it, and we will talk about it in more detail but now later on, was the media were, I mean, there was no fans allowed into this thing. Dana White said he didn't want fans to be there given what had happened the last time these two had met in New York, so they were expecting fireworks. But the media, and I use it in large inverted commas, that were at this thing last night, and the level of questions that they were asking. I mean, they generally started off with, two of them started off, including one from an Irish guy, with Conor, congratulations on your whiskey. I mean, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing at a press conference when that's what you're saying? Like, that is no journalism. Maybe
there were cue cards.
I don't know. They were certainly something. And anyway, that's my take on it. I appreciate that other people are going to have a different view on it, and they're entitled to it, and we actually would love to hear.
But it seems like it's still a thing. The Conor McGregor phenomenon seems to be still a thing. Yeah. Would it be a thing in 5 years' time or 10 years' time?
Well, he signed a 6-fight deal with the UFC, whatever that means, I don't know.
I thought for a while that it was all over. Yeah. The bubble had burst.
He's been 2 years out of it. So
it seems to me that it's back.
Yeah, no, it's back, and I'm absolutely certain that Niall McGrath feels very differently to this than I do. So we will have Niall's thoughts on it a bit later on, and we did have a reporter as well in New York last night, so we'll be bringing you all of that good stuff from the press conference, that report a bit later on. So here's what is coming up between now and 9 o'clock, or probably a little bit thereafter. Myself and John again get stuck into the back pages very shortly, and some interesting news, particularly if you're a hurling fan, particularly if you're a Tipperary hurling fan. That is on the way very shortly. David Meyler's been in conversation. That's what Owen's been doing. He's been off chatting to David Meyler. That is coming your way very shortly as well, and he's a fan of one particular off the ball show. We'll bring you news on what that is with David in just a few moments. Aine O'Gorman is a now former Republic of Ireland international who's retired from the international game, at least at only the age of 29. 100 caps to her name. and she's retired, so we'll be bringing you a live conversation with Aine. That is penciled in for around about 8:30 or thereabouts. Alan Quinlan, as always, on a Friday is going to be jumping into studios. Lots of Pro 14 to talk about, a little bit of World Cup and plenty more as well. And we've been talking about Conor McGregor, so that is coming your way. A 5-minute chat with David Meyler a bit later on, and that is coming in a bit. But first, before all of that, it is time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Right, here's what is going on in this morning's newspapers. We're going to start with that news that we told you about Tipperary hurling. It is the news that Liam Sheedy is back in the frame, and it looks like he's going to get the gig. He's going to become the next Tipperary hurling manager, the second coming, writes John Fogarty here. Sheedy in line for a Tip return, and the full story inside. He's been 2010. He obviously stepped away after Tipperary had won the All-Ireland. Surprisingly so at that stage, John, he was just a month after they'd won the All-Ireland final. But it seems like the hunger is back. He had made some comments on the Sunday game, I think it was actually, after the news had sort of filtered down that there was a vacancy. Sort of saying that, look, inevitably I'm going to get linked with it and Nicky English is going to get linked with it, as John Fogarty writes. But as he said, whoever takes it on will need to have a bit more spare time than I have. He is a busy man professionally, and he was obviously a guy who had his name in the hat as well for the top job at the GEA, and that didn't go his way. But feeling still a young man, not yet 49, that he has something left to offer here.
Yeah, so he did a great job, Adrian, between, I think, 2008 and 2010. They won a Munster title in their first season. He brought a lot of discipline to Tipperary. He had a great backroom staff, Eamon O'Shea and Michael Ryan, of course, who led Tipperary to the 2016 Liam McCarthy Cup. And Willie Maher and Liam Cahill were highly touted for the role. Liam's done a great job, won the Under-21 All-Ireland. But Liam Sheedy is a winner, a proven winner with Tipperary. Famously denied Kilkenny that 5 in a row in 2010, Lark Orbert scoring a hat-trick in the All-Ireland final. But what I remember from his tenure is he brought a structure and a discipline to the Tipperary setup, and Eamon O'Shea came in as a coach. Right. And there's also, speculation this morning that if Liam does take over, that Eamon O'Shea could be back involved, and Eamon O'Shea is a great hurling coach. So there must be a feeling, maybe within Liam, if this is true and he is taking over, that Tipperary need to get back to the top table, because there's still a lot of talent in there. There's like the likes of Seamus Callanan, Bubbles O'Dwyer, Niall McGrath, top players for Tipperary, Pádraig Maher. And with hurling maybe on a bit of a level playing field with Limerick, Galway, Clare, Cork, Waterford, all these teams pretty much at the same level. I think the feeling would be that only 2 years ago Tipperary were extremely impressive All-Ireland winners. They came through a very difficult Munster Championship. They beat Cork and Kilkenny very impressively in the final, and Kilkenny haven't really been the same team since. But it just hasn't worked out since then. Yeah. And maybe Liam, with his track record, is the man to lead them back up to the top table, because the talent is definitely there. Yeah. And they were very close against Galway last year. I mean, John Cannion had to win it in the last book of the game, and that's how close they were.
Yeah.
So
the levelling out of the hurling championship, I think if I was Liam Sheedy, I could easily see why he'd be tempted back by that. And
Clare only got them in the last couple of minutes. The round robin could have gone in different ways this year. Tipperary have a lot of talent. They brought Cork to a draw. Of course, we just talked about the under-21s there. So they're a county that always is there or thereabouts. They've got difficulty with retaining All-Irelands. Haven't done it since the 60s, but Liam Sheedy's got the track record, and if he's interested, and if what the Irish Independent, as well as the Examiner, are saying is true today, I think it'd be a very good appointment, and a very exciting appointment for the Port Row man to return to the Premier.
Yeah, there'll be some carryover of players, obviously, but not a huge amount, I would think, from his time previously. And I know, having done a lengthy session with Owen Kelly and Lara Carbot at one point, and down in Tip, a large majority of it spent talking about Liam Sheedy and what he was bringing to the party in life, sort of post-Babs as it was at the time, and the terms that they speak about him in are incredible. The discipline and the structure that you're talking about that he brought to it, but the buy-in as well was the thing that really struck me, that fellas were sort of willing to kind of do that Ger Loughnane style training for him if that's what he required, that they trusted him and they sort of wanted to get behind him, and that will be the sort of thing you assume that when he it seems like now at this point when he comes back in, that he's going to get that county behind him.
Tipperary don't win that many All-Irelands. They won 89, 91, 2000 won with Nicky English, and then it was until 2010 with Liam, and they only won one since with Michael Ryan, who was part of Liam's team. So they don't win that many. I think because they've had so many brilliant battles with Kilkenny in the last decade or decade and a half, we might have thought that they've won more than they have, but they haven't. And to get back to the top table and have that consistency, I think, is what Tipperary people want to see. And I think Liam might be the man to do that, based on the excellent track record.
Yeah, because even though, like as you say, they have been sort of thereabouts, they've almost fallen off the conversation.
Yeah, and that's what the round robin can do, though.
Yeah.
The round robin in Munster, 2 teams are gone, like that. Waterford and Tipperary. Waterford reached the final last year. Tipperary won the previous year, not even in the conversation. So that's the way it can go, and that'll be the way again next year.
And an interesting development too as well from Owen Cormac here alongside it, just that it looks like GAA Now, which is an online platform for generally up to this point for sort of roundups and clips and archive footage and highlights and that sort of thing. It looks like it might be about to start showing live games. So I guess anybody who's been a student of the game over the last little while would have felt that maybe that was sort of where things were headed. There were quotes from Peter McKenna. And we shall see how all that pans out. As you mentioned, John, the Liam Sheedy story is picked up in the Irish Independent as well. Here this morning it's Michael Verney who's got this story. Sheedy's set for stunning tip return, and as you say, all the links about an Eamon O'Shea, the dream team being back, I suppose, is probably the way to put it there. And a shot of Pedro last night in Chelsea's winning start to the Europa League favourites for the tournament as well. Drugs and Sport, Tracy, credibility of WADA has been called into question. John Tracy has asked some pretty tough questions of WADA. This is good to see that an Irish administrator, a guy that at the very top of that particular tree, is sort of calling the Russians to account. They've been allowed back in by the World Anti-Doping Agency, who haven't given any great detail about why they've sort of overturned this ban, and John Tracy's calling them out over it. I mean, I think it's a positive development that we would ask questions about these things and interrogate it in a way that it deserves to be. Well,
WADA has only been 19 years in existence, and it was one of the biggest proponents of a ban at the Olympic Games in Rio for these Russian athletes, and now it's caved. It seems under pressure. It's part funded by the IOC and part funded by government. You have to think there might be geopolitical pressure here. I think the assurances that they were given were about accepting the McLaren report, Richard McLaren's report, that there was state-sponsored doping around Sochi, and there was over 1,000 athletes guilty of that, and also that they'd be able to get into the labs and see what they've been doing. But how strictly will these new investigations be enforced? And also, what does it say about any country that wants to engage in state-sponsored doping, that after 3 years it'll be wiped out and you'll be back to the table? And it's huge implications for the IAAF and for the Paralympics, because they've been probably the strongest organisations against Russia. I think with only 19 Russian athletes were involved in the World Athletic Championship last year. But it's almost just saying, you know what, we think Russia giving us assurances, everything is okay now, and let's just start again. And it doesn't really bode that well for Tokyo. And once again, I watched 9.79, which is this movie about the 1988 100 metres men's final, which Ben Johnson won, of course, was stripped immediately because he was taking steroids, which I think he'd been doing for years. And this is 30 years ago. And it was still a cloud over sport, the issue of doping, and in anything based on speed and endurance, unfortunately, it just seems to permeate it into the sport, and you just can't get rid of it. No. And this does not inspire confidence. So fair play to John Delaney for coming out, John Tracy, rather. Yeah, Sport Ireland. A Freudian slip there for coming out. Chief exec, yeah. No, absolutely. We had Ben Johnson over at a thing in Trinity College a couple of years ago. He was speaking at an event we had, and part of a broadcast we had, and he has a massive sort of conspiracy theory about that entire thing. He accepts that he took drugs, he just says he didn't take what he was alleged to have taken, and he said there's a lot of... He was between sportswear brands at the time, had moved to a new sportswear brand, and had some sort of a conspiracy about what the other sportswear brand had sort of done to his career or whatever. It was... in that documentary there's a huge amount of an African river, which is denial. Huge amount of that. Yeah. That exists still to this day. There we go. That's the Munster allaying Earl's injury fears as well. He's not part of the Munster squad for the game against Cardiff this weekend. But Johan Van Grant says he's fine. Everything will be all right on the night. There are those two newspapers. The Irish Daily Mail, meanwhile, it's treachery. Russia's return from drugs ban is met with fury. That's just more on that story we've been discussing. Well, that was easy. A picture of Danny Welbeck and Patrick Aubameyang after Arsenal's 4-2 thumping of Vorskla. Poor crowd.
last night. Was there? Yeah, I
a lot of empty seats. So I wonder, is football reaching a tipping point? I read an article about this during the week about police figures not being in line with the official figures that are given at Premier League games and other games, that there might be season tickets that are not used, and there might be like corporate tickets or free tickets that are unsold or not used, and you have a disparity. Then Manchester United is as purely 100%, so it was in line. But with other clubs like Manchester City, Arsenal being another one of them, it's not. It might say that it's 95%. It might only be 85% of the actual attendance. So there could be a tipping point with the saturation of television, with the amount of just the cost of it, and if you're an Arsenal fan, do you want to be going to Europa League games at this stage of the season?
And you wonder also, John,
Ukrainian
how much it matters anymore in that sport, particularly how many people are at the ground. Like, given the levels of funding that's available from TV money specifically, that in terms of the finances of a club, I'm not saying it's insignificant, but it's certainly in terms of the proportion of money that used to come into a club versus what comes in now via merchandise and TV money, it must be incremental at this point. So, are certainly more insignificant. So, we shall see on that. Just one other interesting story from the Irish Daily Mail there this morning by Michael Clifford. Players Chief accuses GAA of double standards. This is the Club Players Association, and Michael Brodie, its chairman, saying that there's been somewhat of an about turn by the GAA and specifically the president, John Horan. So this is just about the point that the fixture list clearly fixed the fixtures is the CPA's mantra. And they say that the CPA have accused GAA chiefs of taking a contradictory position by planning for a new championship, i.e. a second-tier championship, which could be introduced by 2021. And that goes counter, writes Michael Clifford, to what the GAA had said previously about trying to implement the new system, the new structures that have been in, give it some time to sort of bed in, give it a little bit of sort of breathing space, and then see where it goes from there. John Horan sort of reveals here in a press conference yesterday that this was something that had been mooted some years back, and then actually was supposed to, I think, be introduced at Congress, and then didn't quite, got sort of pulled at the last minute. But he says of a recent Central Council meeting, we put it to the floor for just a straw poll opinion. This is about a tiered championship, so a second tier. Put it to the floor for just a straw poll opinion. Every hand went up. Everybody was of the view that it should happen. I mean, whatever about the CPA's anger about it happening or not, it makes infinite sense that this thing would just happen finally, because and there's loads of sense spoken by John Horan in that article about the structure of it, and how it would still mean that all 32 teams would enter the championship with the possibility of winning Sam Maguire every year. And that's sort of the crux of the matter for a lot of teams. When you hear players from the various, the second tier counties speak, they will say, well, we don't want to enter a competition where we don't think we have the opportunity to win Sam Maguire. So that opportunity always remains open for every county at the start of the year, and at some point closes off to just 16 teams. I think that makes infinite sense. They're talking about an end of year All-Stars tour, so again you've got that. They're talking about holding it as the curtain raiser, so
instead of the minor. So the minor tickets would go to
putting that in for the All-Ireland final.
Secondary counties.
I mean, it makes absolute sense now. I think that Sean Kelly had a stab at it in his time some years ago, and probably the ground is clear now to have a proper go at this thing. And I do believe that sort of asking individual counties and players if this is something they want to do, they're never going to say yes to it. So it probably just needs to be bulldozed on in, however that happens.
Well, first of all, on the current structures in GA is a 3-year trial for the round robin, for example, in hurling. They finished the All-Irelands earlier. September is now free for club games. April is meant to be free for club games, although how successful that has been is open to conjecture. But this is a 3-year trial. And I think the GAA have moved towards accommodating the club game, which needs to be done as the lifeblood of the association, more than it has been. So let's just see what the proposals are. Let's just see what the timelines are, and how these things can run off in tandem. But just don't call it a silly name. Just don't call it the second tier championship is a silly name for a couple. Just call it like the All Ireland B Championship, or just give it a degree of regality.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think actually anything to do with B or second tier or anything that suggests it's sort of
some name,
they can give it
whatever cup.
Plenty of legends over the years that they can Tommy Markhams and the Laurie Mara Cups and all that sort of thing, they'll definitely be able to come up with something that puts a bit of fire under it. But I mean, I think that it's an infinitely wise thing to do.
Well, it would be good. I think it would be great to see 82,000 people, and by say maybe 10 to 15,000 of them from second-tier counties at All-Ireland final day. I think that would be exciting. And I think if you're running off these games to get, because we know that for semi-finals at Croke Park, you don't have a full stadium. So if you had that, properly marketed, and it would have to be properly marketed, that if, say, you were doing press briefings on the week, you'd have a press briefing for the curtain raiser and the main game. And these things will be all scheduled and given as much time as possible. But look, it's all in the future. And I think that the GA, they're being brave in recent years. Pork Duffy was brave. It's a 3-year trial for the hurling. I don't personally agree with the calendar. I think it's too squeezed. I think we're giving away, if you're a GA fan, attention to rugby and soccer in September. They've got a free rein now. It actually, I think, helped Limerick because there wasn't that much hype as there would have been previously 20 years ago around Limerick's All-Ireland run. And I think that actually helped Limerick on August the 19th. But to me, it's a little bit too squeezed, but I think the round-robin system has been a great success. And there's nothing wrong in an association that's over 125 years old with trialling things 3 years at a time. It's not, Gaelic football in the 1970s, 1980s was about Kerry playing semi-finals and winning finals, maybe against the Dubs, or the Dubs would beat them. And there wasn't that much excitement around it.
I'd bring it in straight away, John. That my view. I'd get this in straight away. I know it's a labyrinthine organisation by its very nature, and it takes time to get things done. I'd go for it straight away. We do have some news that's just coming into us here. It's a statement from the Connacht Council in relation to the suspended Carnacon players. So this has come into us this morning. We'll give you a bit of a look at this on screen as well as we sort of pick through it here. It's just coming in as news to us as well. So the statement reads, "To it may concern the above appeal," which was the Mayo LGFA County Board's appeal versus Connacht LGFA appeals committees. The above appeal was heard at an emergency meeting of the Connacht Ladies Gaelic Football Council. This was on the 18th of September at the GA Centre in Beacon. Having considered the information presented to the meeting by Mayo County Board, the Connacht's Appeal Committee and the Carnacon Club, under the provisions of Rule 298 of the LGFA Official Guide 2016, it states the rule here: members clubs, divisional and county boards and provincial councils have the right of objection or appeal against the decisions of higher bodies. The committee, board or council to whom the objection or the appeal is made shall have the power to award games, review or impose penalties, etc., 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 as they deem necessary. So the following are the decisions of the council, and this is the crucial bit now. Here, number 1, we hereby uphold the decision made by the Connacht's Appeal Committee to allow Carnacon to compete in the Mayo Championship for the remainder of the 28th season. So Carnacon remain in. Number 2, we impose a fine of €500 on the Carnacon Club pursuant to the rule that states each competing club, school, college, county, etc. shall be responsible for the conduct of its members and followers. So the responsibility of conduct is the takeaway from that, as they impose a €500 fine, and you know where this is going. So in point 3, we impose a month's suspension on the 8 Mayo County players from the Carnacon Club pursuant to the rule that states any member of the association found guilty of conduct calculated to bring the association into disrepute shall be liable to expulsion or suspension by the committee, board or council concerned. And it names out the 8 players that are involved there: Martha Carter, Marie Corbett, Amy Dowling, Darren Hughes, Sive Larkin, Fiona McHale, Cora Staunton and Saoirse Walsh. Suspensions coming into effect from the date of the hearing, which, as I said, was on the 18th September. All parties have a right to appeal the decisions. So that is it. Just to confirm that it's been confirmed. Sorry, one other piece of news here as well for you. It's been confirmed to us this morning that the Carnacon Club are going to appeal the Connacht Council's decision for that fine, and the avenue was open to them. So they are going to make that appeal, and we shall see how all that pans out.
No winners.
The saga continues.
No winners.
The short story from this. Grant, any more developments on that, we'll bring them to you as we get them. Just one bit more from me here. It's the Racing Post this morning. It's Wigan against Bristol City as they tend to do the championship at the back page this morning. 7:45 kickoff. John, what have you got?
Well, the Irish Star, Poch's axe to grind. Spurs boss fears the chop. Absolute nonsense story. Not a story. He signed a 5-year deal. Mauricio Pochettino admits he could be sacked next week. Well, I could be the Tottenham manager next week. It's not going to happen. That's not a story. So that's the Star. GA yet to receive FAI bid contact. This is more of a story from Paul Lennon. This, of course, is around the potential World Cup bid involving the Republic of Ireland in 2030, with England looking to bid. Philly wants to get fiscal, maybe talk about this ESRI report in the 31 hours. What can we look at in terms of helping players out there?
I'm not that surprised actually that the FAI haven't been in touch with Croke Park about. It's literally just happened.
It's going to take time. It's a long time away.
It's like, the news is just broken. It's far too early for them to be in any conversations.
The Mirror humbled Fernandinho. We will have more humility after our Lyon disaster. And traumatised. Pochettino, our bad run has hit the players hard. And if it goes on, I could get sacked. He's not going to get sacked. The Irish Times, always interesting with a different angle on a Friday. Gavin Cummiskey profiling the Rugby World Cup contenders with a year to go. I think just a year, was it yesterday? To the start of the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. We were so excited about it, given Ireland are ranked second in the world.
Gavin giving Ireland a shake there.
He's given Ireland a third ranking behind New Zealand and South Africa. Right. Natural disasters could be a real threat in Japan. There have been 3 major tropical cyclones per year hitting the country's main islands in September. Also talking about tattoos associated with the mafia in Japan. Cover up your tattoos. I don't have any now, and I won't be over there either, so don't worry, folks. So that's in terms of the Irish Times. And we'll go into a couple of in-depth stories here in a moment. Russia white flag sparks fury. This is The Guardian. WADA has cast aside its responsibilities to clean athletes, fans and those who work tirelessly for clean sport. So that's The Guardian back page. But what I was more interested in was Jonathan Wilson, Adrian, about Pep Guardiola and Manchester City. Talking about their defeat to Lyon during the week in the Champions League. Twice as many more shots as their opponents. Not the worst sign if they're not quite at their best yet. I think with De Bruyne to come back, that's a fair point. But this is the paradox. There are rare occasions when it can feel a little mannered, when the very purity of the style seems to make it vulnerable, just as pedigree dogs are more susceptible to disease. That's why Johan Cruyff brought in Hristo Stoichkov to Barcelona to add the mala leche, literally the bad milk, but more idiomatically, toughness, ruthlessness, capacity for improvisation. He felt the side were lacking. So he's maybe making comparisons with Manchester City. When things go wrong, there's nobody there to grab a game and yank it back on course. Jonathan Wilson in The Guardian on that today. They were
supposed to have all these new sort of tactics, Manchester City, that nobody knew about outside of a very sort of crack team. I also wasn't aware that pedigree dogs were more susceptible to...
No, I don't have one. I had a Jack Russell and he's long gone. So... maybe been in the back garden too long, gave him illnesses. But James Lawton also on Guardiola. City's European failings slow Pep's rise to true greatness. Wait for further Champions League glory. 2011 was the last time, Adrian, has the potential to tarnish Guardiola's legacy. What you must begin to wonder is if, even at the relatively youthful age of 47, Guardiola has done the best of his work, already hit the extremes of his talent. That last season's Premier League tour de force created expectations which flew beyond the wilder realities of top European games. So, challenging article by James Lawton on Guardiola. And then Spurs... Humiliated Lloris feels mental pain with injury. He's got a thigh injury at the moment and he's out after that drink driving ban. So yet to return to training. They're playing Brighton at the weekend, Spurs, and under obviously a degree of scrutiny at the moment. This is a bizarre story that emerged yesterday. Construction news about the Tottenham Stadium, which they're hoping to get finished in January. There were people off their heads. This is the workers of the stadium. This claim in this publication, drinking cans first thing in the morning before going on site and snorting coke in the toilets. Mace spokesman, Mace are the people in charge of the construction. They strongly deny the allegations, saying any suggestion that our rigorous standards around best practice or drugs and alcohol had been broken would be taken extremely seriously. We carry out regular random drugs and alcohol testing to ensure our rules are enforced throughout the supply chain. But Tottenham just seems to be a little bit of a club that nothing is going right for at the moment.
That's bizarre in the extreme, it has to be said. Thanks for that, John, for the minute. We'll come some of those in a little bit. We've lots more to come. Myself and John, we're going to be talking to Niall McGrath about the press conference last night. Alan Quinlan's in studio to preview all the rugby for the weekend. Maybe touch on those tattoos as well. We're going to talk to Aine O'Gorman, who retired from international football during the week, so all of that is to come. And Darren Cleary's in studio next to tell us everything about the live sport today. But before all of that, Mick Fennelly, he was a selector for Electric Ireland to name their hurling team of the year in the Minor Star Awards this week, and here's who's made the cut.
That's an insight into you and Ollie in the judging room for this Electric Ireland minor team as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. I have to look at it from his point of view, and I have to potentially agree what he says maybe. And
he's a strong personality we've noticed before when we've had him on.
Ollie?
Yeah, just a little bit. If he has an opinion, he's sticking to it.
That's a Galway lads for you now.
But overall, like, it's a really well balanced team of the year. We're looking at this as well, and you look at it and there's no weak points there. There's no point that you look and think this midfield is really weak, or this midfield is kind of a chink in it. Like, and the spread of teams as well. When you see Dublin having two members in there as well, Colin O'Neill and the Limerick side of things getting in there too. I mean, it's nicely balanced amongst the sides at the later stages.
Exactly, and look, it's a small little kind of token of how they played this year, and some players might have underperformed this year, and they'll get their chance then maybe 18, 19, and just because you're not making this team or not making the Kilkenny team, Kilkenny minor team, there's still a chance you can actually develop and get better. And some players, they spring at different times, and that's really important.
My worry is for you is that the All-Star judging panel is usually like a closed book. Like, we don't necessarily know who's on it from year in and year out. You and Canning have two big arrows pointing over your heads. So you might, when you go to this awards night, basically have a gang of lads who weren't on the team going, all right, Mick, what did I do wrong exactly to not get on here? And you're like, you could just be like, I had you in there, he didn't. Is that the kind of
Ollie be getting behind the finger at Ollie. Exactly.
Mick Fennelly in conversation with Richie there on the show last night. You can check out that full piece thanks to Electric Ireland and the Minor Star Awards. It's up on offtheball.com. Darren Cleary, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian.
You have all the roundup of everything that's happening. We've got lots more still to come, by the way. Alan Quinlan in the studio, Aine O'Gorman and Niall McGrath on that press conference last night, Darren. I'm sure that's not leading the way for you this morning.
It's not, Adrian. We're going to recap the breaking news you brought us just a moment ago, and that it's been confirmed to Off the Ball this morning that the Carnacon club are appealing the Connacht Council's decision to fine the club €500 and suspend 8 players who chose to walk away from the Mayo panel earlier this summer. They were suspended for 4 weeks earlier this week. They did have the right to appeal the suspension and the fine, and they have chosen to do so. It has been confirmed. The players in question: Martha Carter, Marie Corbett, Amy Dowling, Doireann Hughes, Sive Larkin, Fiona McHale, Cora Staunton and Saoirse Walsh. So it was said this week that it was hoped that a line would be drawn under this. The manager, Peter Leahy, said he was done talking about it. The players intimated that they just wanted to move on with their lives, but it appears it will rumble on with the confirmation that they will be appealing the decision to impose a €500 fine on the club and ban those players for 4 weeks. Meanwhile, Dundalk can move a step closer to the SSE Electricity League title later. Stephen Kenny's men hold a 6-point advantage over Cork with a game in hand. That's ahead of the clash between the top two later. The defending champions without key players for this must-win game. Barry McNamee, Colm Horgan and Johnny Dunleavy all ruled out. Elsewhere tonight, a big battle at the bottom of the table. It's Bray Wanderers going head-to-head with Limerick at the Carlisle Grounds in a match that begins at 7:45. Waterford can move ahead of Shamrock Rovers into third place in the league table. That's if they beat Sligo Rovers in the RSC. That match also off at 7:45. There's late drama in the Europa League. Celtic snatched victory at the death last night. Lee Griffiths the hero for the Hoops. He headed the winner in their opening group stage match against Rosenborg. Rangers grabbed a 2-2 draw with Villarreal in Spain. Stephen Gerrard's team twice came from behind in that one to grab a point, while Arsenal opened their campaign with a comfortable 4-2 win over Volska at the Emirates Stadium. Willian's early goal helped Chelsea get off to a winning start in their group stage. They beat Greek side Powick, while Rory McIlroy is just 2 shots off the lead heading into the second round of the season-ending Tour Championship in Georgia. The Ulsterman holds a share of 5th place on 5 under par. Tiger Woods and Ricky Fowler, the men to catch their top of the leaderboard, a single shot advantage over Gary Woodland and Justin Rose. Well, the Sport Ireland Chief Executive John Tracy has hit out at the World Anti-Doping Agency's decision to reinstate the Russian Anti-Doping Agency. The team were tasked with catching dopers in the country, but were actually helping to hide positive results. The Russians banned after widespread cheating uncovered before the Sochi Winter Olympics in 2014. Athletes not only had their positive samples hidden by the board, but they were assisted by the state to use performance-enhancing substances before competition. Just some of the quotes Tracy said on Morning Ireland today. It's devastating for us involved in the anti-doping movement. It's devastating for clean athletes all over the world. If you think the crime being committed here, we are talking over 1,000 athletes, over 30 sports that were assisted by the state to use performance-enhancing substances before competition. It makes Ben Johnson's positive in 88 look very tame indeed.
Very good, Darren. You've been watching the golf, John, and you've been following a little bit.
Tiger Woods, very impressive, guys, with that eagle last night. And I think he had a few putts from a distance. That was over 20 feet, and he had another couple earlier on in his round, which got his round going. Tiger Woods is going to win a major. I think Tiger Woods is back. And
are you in the one major or multiple major category?
I wouldn't say multiple. I'd say he might win another couple. But what he did at the PGA was a game changer for me. It just showed to me that he's comfortable. At the Open, he had a chance to win it, and he just didn't have the game on the final day. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, not sure mentally, does he have that Indian sign over everybody, which he used to when he was at the peak of his powers. But the PGA performance, when he closed very significantly to finish second, and what he's been doing recently and going into the Ryder Cup, he just seems to have clicked back into gear, which is just incredible for somebody who possibly never was able to walk again at one stage of those 4 back surgeries. So it's really exciting, and the Masters couldn't come soon enough. I wish the Masters was next week. I wish the Rugby World Cup was next week, because I'm worried about Ireland and I'm worried about Tiger Woods not being right by next April. Hopefully he will be. But Rory did well, and Shane Lowry's done well as well out in Portugal, because he badly needs a good performance. Yeah,
he seems to be coming again as well. Did you watch the press conference last night?
I stayed up late to watch it, and I regretted it immensely and immediately, because it was such a sideshow.
You normally in bed before 11 o'clock, would you?
I would, yeah. I try to get to bed by 10:30 every night.
Dedication to the cause right there.
Try to get a good 8 hours to function somewhat early in the morning.
What'd you make of it?
It is all pageantry. I couldn't believe the sycophants who were asking the questions of McGregor. I mean, they all thanked him for being there. It was such
the very first question, the very first journalist that stood up to ask a question said, "Thanks guys for coming
to your press conference to promote your fight, which we are going to now broadcast all over the world for you."
Listen.
It was a strange one. We're going to go with an angle from McGregor. We're actually going to hear from him, and he's talking about how money was not his primary motivating factor to get back into the octagon. A man who gets 100 million for a boxing match, you'd wonder why he'd want to get back in and be kicked and punched in the head. He says it's not about the money, but he has signed a new 6-fight deal with the UFC, and UFC 229 is on pace to generate 2.5 million pay-per-view buys. To put that into context, Adrian, the buys will smash the previous record of 1.6 million. Also a fight McGregor headlined against Nate Diaz. That was UFC 202. And the 30-year-old has been telling us, or telling the world indeed, that it's not about the cash, and it's all personal.
I came back for the love of this, to come and shut this man up. A little rat, a little weasel, a little hard man in groups. I've met many of them through my years. A man who grows in numbers, but on his own, and when confronted in a similar situation, cowers away. And that's what you saw with that little shit on the bus over there. He shit his jocks after doing something to his own countryman that had nothing got to do with anything. And that's it. I came back for the love of fighting and the love of war. And this, I am going to truly, truly love, putting a bad beating on this little glass jaw rat.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate snapshot of about a half an hour's over and back. I say over and back conversation last night. It was more over than it was back.
He didn't say a whole lot, did he?
He really wasn't
getting involved.
2.5 million pay-per-views. I wonder how that compares with the Mayweather fight.
Yeah, I'm actually not quite sure of the figures.
I might do a bit of research on that before I throw it out the next time.
Yeah,
finally, you've got a bit more detail on a story that we touched on earlier on about tattoos.
Tattoos. If you have tattoos, Adrian, you should cover them up for the Rugby World Cup in Japan, because body art has long been associated with the notorious crime syndicates of the Yakuza. Players are being asked not to wear to actually wear vests when using gyms or pools, because visibly inked tourists are not permitted at some businesses. There is a worry that the tattoos could cause offence, so World Rugby is actually beginning classes to educate players in advance of the Rugby World Cup, to kind of teach players about the culture of Japan and what not to do to inadvertently offend anyone.
All right. I'm fine.
You're fine.
I'm absolutely
You're not
fine.
inked.
Yourself?
I'm fine. I'm afraid of needles.
Told us
I've already given you the
ink-free.
The definitive.
Let's all go to Japan. They can
Alan
send us.
Quinlan's coming in later on. I'll reserve that one for him as well. Darren, thanks a million for the minute with an update there of everything that's going on. Darren Cleary. Celtic, as Darren mentioned, left it late last night to beat Rosenborg in the Europa League. Here's Chris Commons speaking on Virgin Media Sport last night about the kind of football Brendan Rodgers' side are playing.
Who knows? You know, I think the manager's obviously got a good winning formula at the minute. I think he's got, like I said, he's got players at his disposal that are all at the top of the game. Resting Hazard, resting Giroud. They've got some big games coming up. Obviously, West Ham away. They've got Liverpool in the Cup, and then they face Liverpool again in the Premier League. So they've got a big couple of weeks, big games. You need your big game players. Bang at it, week in, week out.
Why do you think it's been so quick? Maybe not easy. I'm not going to say that, but so quick for Chelsea to get to a point where they're playing so well with a new manager. Do you think there was a sense, like you touched on earlier, things just weren't right under Conte, that the players were just absolutely relishing a change of approach under Sarri?
I think going back what Keith's just said there, I think they've got a freedom of attacking play. I think Sarri only a couple of weeks ago mentioned about the defensive side of things, that he's not quite happy with his defence. You know, he mentioned other Premier League teams that have got a better squad, a better defence. I think if they get that right, they can probably challenge on all fronts. But I think this is the best way of them getting certainly Champions League football next season.
Yeah, Chris Commons and Keith Andrews in conversation there with Tommy on Virgin Media Sport last night. The new home, of course, of European football in Ireland, with more than 400 UEFA Champions League, Europa League and Nations League games live this season. Virgin Media Sport exclusive to all Virgin Media TV customers, who can also download the TV Anywhere app and stream all the action whenever and wherever they like. Celtic, Brendan Rodgers particularly, John, I know Rangers had a good draw last night. As it turns out, it must have felt a bit like a win to them. Potentially reinvigorated Celtic by the arrival of Steven Gerrard and the profile that he brings, and particularly if they're going to be playing the level of quality or something, grinding out the results that they got last night to prove themselves a bit more competitive in the SPL.
Well, I was there at the All-Ireland football final before, watching the Old Firm Derby, and I was going, I want to go to this. So I haven't had that feeling in a while, because Rangers haven't been involved in the last few years. So Gerrard, look, he's a big name. When they went behind in the first minute, Carlos backed his goal. You're thinking this could be a long night for Rangers, but they battled back very well. Kyle Lafferty, of course, going back to them, and it was good goal by Griffiths. And when I was looking at the Arsenal dead stadium, and I was looking at Parkhead, there's a big difference in just even the reaction, and obviously that's the level where Celtic and Rangers are at right now. But the supporters certainly have that unconditional love and passion for these clubs, so I think it's a good thing. Nobody wants to see, as much as Irish people are generally fans of Celtic, nobody wants to see them winning titles by 30 points and then not qualifying for the Champions League group stage, or winning trebles. You want a competitive, you want Celtic. The Rangers are the best thing that could happen for Celtic, to have a competitive Old Firm.
Looking at some of those games last night, like Arsenal obviously had an easy enough win. Chelsea not much in it, but got it done. Like it struck, and we were chatting to Andrew Mangan of Arseblog during the week, arseblog.com, about Arsenal prospects for the season ahead. Like, it does strike you that they are really going to battle to get into the top four this season, and winning the Europa League might maybe their only route almost into the Champions League next season.
You just have to worry. I mean, it's obvious that Manchester City, I would say Liverpool and United are going to fill three of the places, and Chelsea have started the season so well. So at the moment they could be the top four. Tottenham are having the problems we touched upon earlier. But it is a rebuilding job for Unai Emery. It's just so strange not seeing Wenger there. You're
still getting to grips with it.
Yeah, I am still. I just find it's an era. Look, it was an era. It was a 2-decade era, and it's just strange not seeing him there. Of course, Aubameyang is a goal machine. He's going to score a lot of goals. Of course, Leno and Terrera starting last night. So
Lacazette looking pretty pissed on the bench for Arsenal.
I think Arsenal will, I think they'll get there. They'll come good, but it'll just take a couple of years. Like everybody, Unai Emery needs time. Wenger was lucky in that within a couple of years he'd won a league title. And he was really good in some of his early signings, Vieira, Petit, bringing these players into the club. It's hard with City, Liverpool, and I think Manchester United have got a bit more stability in the last couple of weeks. Good win for them during the week.
Our question about the pay-per-views, Andy Dunleavy's been in touch on YouTube. Good morning to you, Andy. Thanks for getting in touch and doing a bit of research for us. We do appreciate it. Mayweather-McGregor, he says, was 4.3 million pay-per-view buys, so they're talking about 2.5 million for this Khabib-McGregor fight. Mayweather-Pacquiao, however, was 4.6 million buys, so that left everything in the halfpenny place, as it were. Jonathan says, give up the moralising, please. It's a fight. I mean, it's not really so much the fight that we were, as you so eloquently put it, moralising about. It was more the fakery and the nonsense that went on last night. We'll have more discussion on that in a little bit. And Juan Jose says, JD proving a good, knowledgeable voice on OTB AM.
Thank you.
The fan club is out there, John.
Well, thank you. That's a nice thing to hear. Friday morning.
Exactly. I think they're used to looking at Friday mornings probably, and realising that there is...
Don't put yourself down, Adrian. Don't put yourself down.
knowledge is a scarce resource on Friday. But look at, we'll take all that praise. I'm happy to sort of, engulf myself in that praise as well. Why not? 8:30 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us. Do keep your comments coming in, whether it's on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter, whatever else you're having. Do get in contact with us. We really do appreciate your comments and want to hear from you. Just a reminder as well that Liam Miller's testimonial match is on next Tuesday at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It's at 3 o'clock kick-off there. The testimonial dinner is on that evening as well. Will O'Callaghan will be down there for Off the Ball, talking to the great and the good of Irish football and beyond. We'll have plenty from Will over the course of the day. If you missed out on tickets for the match itself, by the way, you can still contribute to the fundraising efforts by taking part in the silent auction. There are signed jerseys from Bobby Charlton, from Ronaldo, from John Giles, concert tickets as well, and plenty more. So get your bids in now at galabid.com/Liam. That's galabid, GALA bid.com/Liam, and we have a pair of tickets to give away. So to win them, just leave us a comment this morning on the show. Use the hashtag OTBAM so we know that you've entered in that competition. And before we sign off in a little bit, we're going to bring you the winner of that comp. So a pretty nice prize on this Friday morning. Next Friday, by the way, FIFA 19. We're all pumped about it. It's going to be released. Owen Sheehan is probably the most pumped about it, has to be said, though. He got to head over to the launch in London this week. He caught up with Ireland's David Meyler and Mamadou Sakho. We're going to bring you those full interviews on next week's OTBAM, for stay tuned for all of that. But first of all, here's a snippet of David Meyler, who it turns out is a big fan, why wouldn't he be, of the Keith Andrews show right here on Off the Ball.
I suppose he'd have to squeeze into the top 10, wouldn't he? I think there's only about 8. Look, Keith knows his stuff. Keith's played internationally, he's played in the Premier League. Keith knows what he's talking about. So Keith knows he's a good pundit.
I love the way you've gone full pundit on another pundit talking about him. Let's talk about FIFA. Let's talk about your rating. You've obviously got the game, you've played a little bit. Are you disappointed with your rating? Are you happy with your rating? Have they got you bang on the money?
Do you know what, right? I see a lot of people complain about their ratings, going on about it should be this, it should be that. You're never far off. Let's be realistic. I'm 69. I'm not going to hide that, right? I wish I was 70. 70 is a good number, but it is what it is. So I'm not. I get my pro player card off FIFA, or off EA, should I say? So that's 99 rated. So
yeah,
makes me look good.
Where are you ranked in terms of the Irish players in this year's edition?
Ooh.
You said Seamus is number 1 at 80 or something?
I'd say Seamus, yeah. Seamus is the highest. James McCarthy wouldn't be too far off. I think Seamus might be higher. I think Seamus is 81, James is 80. McLean will be mid-70s or low 70s, just to 72, 73. Besides that, because we don't, I think Harry Arthur's 77, but it's only really Seamus and James that will break the 80 mark.
Ronaldo and Messi have the same rating this year. Is that a cop-out?
Yeah, Messi's better.
I agree. We did get a lot of abuse on Twitter and from yourself actually, after we did picked an ultimate team earlier on this year, but we picked it completely wrong. We did like a draft setting, and therefore the team that we picked didn't have Messi. So thanks to you retweeting it, we got a lot of abuse from people saying that we don't love Messi. But I agree with you. I would have picked him if I had the first pick in the draft.
Oh yeah, well do you know what? You got to put the mark down. Look, I admire the two of them. Yeah. They're phenomenal footballers. Ronaldo is the ultimate goal scorer. If you ever hear any professional, this is how I judge them. If you ever hear any professional who's played with Ronaldo or worked with Ronaldo will say how hard he's worked to get to the top. Nobody ever says that about Messi. They just talk about how naturally gifted he is. And for me, I prefer to watch Messi. Yes, Ronaldo will score goals in big games. Yeah. That's Cristiano loves the headlines. He's the best. He's one of the best of all time. But for me, it's Messi.
First off, Dave, what do you make of the new FIFA? Have you had a chance to have a go at it yourself?
Yeah, I've been playing. I played yesterday. Obviously with the early access on Xbox, I've been able to play. So I played about 4 or 5 hours yesterday. Split up mine, not straight off the box. No, I'm enjoying it. Obviously, they've changed the shooting, finishing as we call it.
It takes a bit of time.
Yeah, it does. I actually lost my first 2 games. The new rivals.
Oh, right, yeah.
But we managed to turn things around. I'm starting to get the hang of it. So I think where you go in and you can practice train and shoot free kicks. I think a lot of people should spend a lot of time doing that, just to get the idea.
And have you had a chance to have a look at the house rules? Are any of them taking your fancy, or?
Do you know what? I haven't. I've just focused on building my ultimate team straight away.
Yeah.
But over time that will come, because obviously we've got the 10 hours of access, and obviously that's gone.
Yeah.
When the game comes out next week, so I want to get the old Ultimate Team going straight away.
Have you got a peek at your FIFA rating or any of your Ireland teammates' FIFA ratings? Or anything like that?
I do know I'm 69. I think Seamus Coleman's 80. I just hope James Clean's probably 72 or something. I hope he's like 68 below me, so I can just bring him in.
Speaking of James Clean, are you aware of the no rules feature on this game? You had a real life no rules. Who would you want on your team?
Seamus Coleman.
James Coleman, really?
Seamus, no. Clean, no. Clean was just running around doing nothing. Do you know Seamus played centre back for Donegal up to minor, and you see the way he plays now. You imagine him playing GA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He'd have been horrible. And I say to him all the time when we end up talking about GA or whatever. So I think if it was a go-to man, it'd be him.
Yeah. How are you settling that, Red? I know it's a new move for you.
No, it's been good, but obviously results haven't been great. There's no point in hiding it. We haven't been performing well enough. But we're working really hard to change it. We've been unlucky in games. We've not done enough in games. There's no point beating around the bush. We need to do more. Look, the good thing about the championship is I think we have played 8 games now. We've still got 38 left. It's a 40 game or 46 game season, so it's plenty of time. You know what I mean? We've a game this Saturday against Hull, so it's just games coming thick and fast. So we just need to turn the corner.
Yeah. And obviously there's a big international games coming up next month. How much are you looking forward to them, and do you think you can get results?
Yeah, I do think we can get results. Look, we were disappointed with the way the Wales game went, and the manner in which it went. But you know, this is the great thing. It's next month. You know, after the last time we played Denmark, it was a big turnover. We had to wait a long time for March, which was tough because it was their teams were starting to focus on the World Cup and we couldn't. You know, It was obviously bitterly disappointing. But we want to get a victory against Wales. Then we've got Denmark as well at home. So it's 2 huge games at home. And obviously with the way it is now, we need to get results. So that's what we're trying to do.
Big into your gaming, John?
I was hugely into Tiger Woods' PGA Tour, which I completely conquered. And I had this guy, you could design your own player, and a guy had a cowboy hat who drove the ball 400 yards. And
it's a manifestation of your own personality.
Well, my kind of secret personality. But yeah, I'd be shooting 55 at St Andrews, this kind of stuff. Right. But soccer is something I never really get to grips with the controls, and you're passing, you're shooting, and I'm not really good at it. But like the graphics in some of these games are just out of this
incredible.
World. Yeah. Football Manager never really got into. It was more Grand Theft Auto, man.
John O'Luma Rugby 95. Just things went downhill after that for me, John. You know that was the peak. We've a bunch of people commenting on YouTube as well. Off the back of this, Robbie Brady not in the late 70s, says Corey Jane. Brady should be 80, says another commenter here on YouTube on that topic. Wish I could like McGregor, but I can't, says a very reasonable commenter on YouTube. Generally, people tend to be sort of at one end of the scale or the other, but it's just perfectly reasonable comment there. James F on YouTube, ex-Celtic midfielder Shinsuke Nakamura is the best free taker in the game, and he's 40 years old. Nakamura's a legend, says the beautiful game, who also wonders if David Meyler's retired. No, he hasn't retired. He was just sort of invited to turn up at some sort of a press launch, and we were happy to speak to him. And much more from that FIFA 19 launch, as we said at the top, on the show next week. It is with real football. We stay. Aine O'Gorman is now a former Republic of Ireland international, 100 caps to her name, who retired during the week. Good morning to Aine.
Hi, how are you?
How's it going?
Good, all good, and you?
All good. That former international, I don't know if you've had a few days to let it sort of sink in now. Has it sunk in?
No, not really yet. I don't think. It'll probably only sink in when the next round of matches are next month. It'll probably really hit home, but it's been a busy few days and quite an overwhelming few days as well. So, no, it hasn't sunk in yet, but I'm sure it will in time.
You wrote a lovely letter that appeared up on the FAI website. It spoke about the sadness and the joy of it all, and you were only 29. I wondered how much you had to wrangle with the call, or was it quite straightforward for you in the end?
Yeah, no, I think it's something that it's obviously a happy kind of sad time for me. It's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. To take a step back, so I went and talked to the manager and kind of let him know how I was feeling, and then I came to the decision late last week. So I've been committed for 12 years now, and I'm on 100 caps. So it's time now just to take a step back and let all the young talent come through.
Yeah, listen, 100 caps is way beyond what most people will ever achieve, so it's a stunning feat in itself. I presume you're sitting down with Colin Bell on the basis that there's still an inkling of you that might want to carry on, and you're looking for him almost, I guess, to try and convince you to keep going.
Yeah, I suppose I'll keep playing my club football anyway, and at the minute I think I'm happy enough to take a step back from the internationals and maybe look at the next chapter and what I'm going to do in my life. So I'll keep enjoying my club football with Peamount and see what happens down the line. I'm going to do my coaching badges at the end of November, my UEFA B, so we'll see what happens then and take a bit of time out to think. Yeah,
I know because we chatted just before you got your 100 cap actually out in Norway a couple of months back, and we spoke on that occasion about the various sort of roles that you've played within the team. You were an unused sub, I think, in the Northern Ireland match. Was that the one that sort of convinced you that actually, look, it's time for me to sort of slip on out the exit door here?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's been something that's on my mind for a while, and then obviously you're always disappointed to sit on the bench as well, and I suppose it's try not to overthink that moment either. But yeah, I think maybe that 100% confirmed in my mind. Maybe it's time just going to take a complete step back and let all the young girls come through.
Aine, John Duggan here. Good morning. Your first cap at 16 years of age. How has the game changed in all that intervening period?
Yeah, John, I think since I started, you can look back and the game has changed a lot. Even just the media coverage and the crowds getting the talent, exposure the game's getting now, and I think the game as well has improved. The structures have improved within women's football in Ireland. So it's only a massive positive, I think, since I stepped foot on the pitch when I was 16 to now that the strength to get Graham has grown. So I think the future is bright and the girls will qualify for the Euros next campaign.
You were at that press conference 18 months ago when there was a discussion about conditions. Have things improved since then, Aine?
Yeah, they definitely have massively, and I think that was probably a momentous moment in my career, and a lot of the girls, that the unity we showed, and it was obviously a day that we didn't want to have to do, but something that we did do, and probably changed women's football and sport in Ireland. So yeah, it's another positive, I suppose, I can take with me when I retired. That's a strange thing to say, but yeah. So it definitely has changed, and things are a lot more professional now, which is great to see.
And you were at the Doncaster Bells, who I think are with Arsenal, pretty much the preeminent team of the last 20, 30 years in English football. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I think that was a great experience. A learning experience for me as a person and as a player, and I think it helped me develop both regards as well. So that was a great experience. It's something I don't regret, like playing at the top flight football in England for 2 seasons, and it was a great experience. So I think that probably stood by me in my latter career. Stephanie
Roach was a good pal of yours, I think, Aine. Was it strange? It must have been strange as a friend of yours to see her be nominated for that Pushcast Award. What a brilliant achievement that was. Even looking back, that was something else.
Yeah, I think me and Steph are pretty close. We've been roomies since underage right up till the end. So yeah, it was strange seeing her at the Puskas and Ronaldo looking at her all. But I think it was a great time for football in Ireland just to give out more coverage and expose the game more. So obviously it was a phenomenal goal, and I was on the pitch that day, and I think I couldn't even celebrate because they're so in shock at what just happened.
You sort of touched on the issues that the team had last year, on at least culminating last year, I suppose. There was well publicised at the time, the stuff particularly about the changing of the tracksuits, the airport and all this kind of stuff. On reflection now, was it always a little bit of a battle in terms of those facilities and support and that sort of stuff, or were there peaks and troughs to it?
Yeah, I think it was slowly starting to improve anyway, but we just needed to make the leap, I think, to the next step to compete against our counterparts in all the other countries. So now we're on a level playing field, and it probably puts more pressure and demands on the players as well, but I think it's a good pressure and good demands that now we have to perform to better standards and deliver on the pitch. Is it sufficient yet? No, there's always room for improvement. Always, yeah. I feel there's more to that comment. No, not now. No, it's as good as it's going. All right, well, we get you in again. We might press you a bit more on that one. We did, when we spoke that night in Stavanger, I was pressing you about to give us a highlight of your career up to that point, and you weren't to be drawn on it. You were hopeful that night was actually going to be it, and obviously, as it turned out, it didn't turn out the way that you guys would have wanted it to have.
on reflection now over the 100 caps, what's the highlight for you?
Yeah, I think that this is something I've been asked a lot over the last few days, and obviously the 100 cap was a momentous moment despite the result that day. It's hard when we didn't qualify for a major tournament. I think I said to someone yesterday that we played Germany in Tallaght Stadium and we came really, really close to beating them. We were just they just scored late in the game, so that was a disappointing. That could have got some points out of that. And then I think a game out in Portugal that kept the European hopes alive at the time, and when we won 2-1 in tough conditions, was probably a good memory as well. But obviously we went on then later to lose to Finland and failed to qualify.
Yeah, look, it's been an incredible career. You've mentioned already the future holds. The club game is still very much there with Peamount, and you're going to sort of jump on in the coaching end of things.
Yeah, I'll definitely get my coaching badges and then see where I end up. I definitely want to contribute back to women's football and sport in Ireland. So we'll see what way that road takes me.
And on, you still doing the personal training?
Yeah, I'm in work now. I'm getting ready to teach a class at 9 o'clock. So been in work since 6 o'clock, so yeah, I'm doing personal training and fitness instructor here at the Glenview Leisure Club. So yeah, happy out and I love my job, so that makes it easy.
You'll get no sympathy here for 6 o'clock starts on you if that's what you're looking for.
Oh yeah.
Anya, what do you have in store for them this morning?
Sorry?
What do you have in store for them this morning?
It's like a strength hit class, so I have a little circuit all set out for them. So
God help them, Anya.
Give us a plug there again. Where's the gym?
Glenview Leisure Club.
Excellent, go and check it out. Anya, congratulations on an absolutely stellar career. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks, see you soon.
Bye, Anya.
Thanks a lot, Aine O'Gorman there. Now former Republic of Ireland international, 100 caps to her name. Pretty incredible, stellar career, and lots of good messages coming in as well. Bookworm, congratulations, Anya, sort of sums it up on YouTube. Do keep your comments coming in. We've a lovely, nice prize for you this morning in relation to the Liam Miller testimonial match next week. So any commenters who want to be involved in that this morning are in the hat for it. So that is all to come. We've Niall McGrath popping into the studio in a little bit to talk Khabib McGregor. It's what you've been waiting for all morning. We're going to bring it your way very shortly indeed. And Alan Quinlan is standing by. He's going to talk all things rugby with us in just a few moments' time. But before all that, we had Kenny Cunningham in studio during the week, and I put it to him that I'd seen the Paul Gascoigne documentary that had been on the night before, and wondered for his thoughts on it.
Problems have been well documented, obviously post retirement. I mean, the tragedy for me in his football, and I don't think it's his football career was a tragedy. My first year at Millwall, I remember Tottenham came down to the Old Den, and it was when we first started, I think, from Millwall, and he played. Lineker played centre forward. Actually, he played in midfield as well, and he was phenomenal. I couldn't get near him. Close control, manipulation of the ball, upper body strength. You know, you try and get tight to people, have a little nibble. Couldn't get near them. Must have got smashed about half a dozen times off his elbow. He literally, oh yeah, right. He could look after himself.
What stage of his career? Where was he at that point?
He was at Tottenham.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, he had that. He's brilliant at Tottenham, absolutely brilliant. But then, in terms of footballing perspective, it all turned. You're talking about he got dealt a bad hand, but that tackle in the FA Cup semi-final, the bad knee injury.
Yeah, that was what set everything off. Really,
that wild, ridiculous.
It was a lay challenge. He described.
Gary Charles was stupid, absolutely.
And it's clear, like he'd accept it was regular.
And he bounced to Lazio from there, but I don't think physically that injury really set him back.
10 to 9 on this Friday morning. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning.
How are you, Quinny?
John, how are you?
Good now.
Have you seen that Gaza doc, John? It was the one Gary Lineker features very heavy in.
I don't want to watch the Gaza doc. I think it's too sad.
It's very sad, I have to say. That was the main emotion.
Because you're a Tottenham fan as well. And
Gascoigne, I saw Paul Gascoigne play in April 1990 at White Hart Lane. They beat Manchester United, who were about to go on to win the FA Cup, which really broke Ferguson's duck. And Gascoigne ran the show for the first half hour. He was unbelievable, and he scored and Lineker scored, and that was just before the 1990 World Cup when he was at his peak, and it's just very sad. And I remember reading a book about Gascoigne. I think one of the things, I don't want to digress here too much, but
digress away, John, that's what we're here for.
There was a young friend of his called Stephen Spraggan, and he was, I think Paul and himself were playing, and he got killed. When I think Paul was, he was only about 10, and I think that really affected him.
Yeah,
you know?
There was two tragedies that sort of happened around his life at a young age that I think must be responsible for his state of mind. You know, must have a huge factor in it. And
I read an unauthorised, I think, biography about him, which touched upon that, and this was really very soon after the World Cup 1990. But he was an amazing player, and I think also what really hurt him was that knee injury he suffered in the FA Cup final in 91. He was never really the same player after that. The cruciate, I think it's different now. You know yourself, Alan. Near 20 years
totally
later.
Nowadays,
In terms of the treatment of injuries.
I was watching that. I came back after a cruciate 5.5 months, and that's Josh van der Fleer, who I was chatting to last night, about 6 months, and that's the time difference now. When you go back to the soccer players, I remember Michael Owen, his knee, Gaza, all this. It's so
Alan
long
Shearer.
back then, yeah.
Brian Clough's career was ended by that injury.
It's amazing. It just goes to show the sports science and medicine. But I think I love Gaza. I watched it. I've read a few books about it. Yeah. I think it is a very sad story, John, and I know where you're coming from, but I think it's a positive story now, at the moment. You know, and I follow him on Twitter. He's always putting stuff up there now, and he seems to have a good team around him looking after him. And look, he's incredible. You'd have to be affected by the story, the talent, and for me as a former sports person, in no way is it anyway the same, but just knowing the commitment and the talent that was there, and the distractions, I suppose, and that fame that kind of arrived. Some of the funny stories about buying the house for his dad.
And Terry Venables bought him a house, bought his father a house. His
sister wanted a jacuzzi.
His mother a car, and his sister a jacuzzi or sunbed or whatever it was. And that's what signed. What resulted in him signing for Spurs?
He could have went to United.
That was it.
Could have played for Ireland as well, of course. Through the granny rule, could have played for the Republic of Ireland, and Jack did have a look at him. So he was never going to happen. But I don't know if the Premier League would have taken off without Gascoigne, because there's a huge change in British society around that time, around the early 90s. There's a lot of tragedies, and football had to change after the tragedy of Hillsborough, and also the way the government treated football and treated people in England. And then you had all the all-seater stadiums, and they badly needed that World Cup in 1990 England to give themselves a bit like this year, to give themselves a bit of optimism with what was going on in the country. And I think Gascoigne was the catalyst for the change that we saw with the Premier League. And just as much as we had catalysts in Ireland with U2 or Italia 90 or Euro 88 or Mary Robinson and that, sometimes you can say, well, this is a bit far-fetched or pie in the sky thinking, but sometimes you just need feel-good, and Gascoigne was a feel-good back then in 1990.
Not to make too clunky a segue, but speaking of feel-good, Liam Sheedy's back in the game, Quinny.
Well, it looks that way, yeah. It looks like it's going to be announced. I'm happy. There's a smile on my face. I think he'll be great. He's a disciplinarian. He's had success before. I think obviously there's a lot of talent there in that group. They're probably a whisker away from beating Clare and pushing themselves forward and getting in the knockout stages. And you think if Tipperary they would kind of, from our point of view as Tipperary people, we just probably needed to get out of Munster and get in the mix. But a couple of stories of fitness around players and guys probably not preparing as hard this year under Michael Ryan after what he achieved in 16 and what Eamon O'Shea achieved as well, So there's a lot of good work there, but there's always this kind of frustration that it could be better. Maybe the players aren't pushing themselves hard enough, and maybe that sounds unfair.
What about managers going back, Quinny, though? Does it ever work?
Yeah, look, I think it works if you've had success, and he didn't drag it out. Liam left after that. He left on a high. I always think of Clive Woodward when they won the World Cup in 2003, he left. Your reputation's intact. If your reputation gets damaged and you go back, there's a bit more risk, but there's pressure. So Liam Sheedy going back to Tip now, me as a Tip fan are going, right, deliver, please. And, Paddy O'Shea made that famous remark about the Kerry football supporters. I tell you, Tipperary
You're
hurling,
a crowd of effing animals, are you?
I wouldn't say we're effing animals, but we're not far from it. Look, it's such a passion in Tipperary hurling. I know all the other counties, a lot of them are the same, but I'm just speaking as a Tip man. It excites people, and there's definitely a frustration after winning in 2016, the last two seasons, the way it's gone. But look, they were beaten by Galway last year in the semi-final by a point, and this year was just a big disappointment. So he obviously, as a person himself, sees something here, because he's taken a little bit of a risk. He sees something there, and that grow to get back in.
Yeah.
has brought him back.
The other thing that doesn't always work is when players sort of step up into the sort of head coach or managerial roles, like long associated players, and Jordan Murphy, I'm sure, has a long coaching career ahead of him. He's learned a pretty big lesson in week 1. He's the interim Leicester Tigers head coach, and we touched on this when you were here last week in terms of the tackle that had been made and the punishment meted out, which was confirmed suspension during the week. And he's since rolled back on his comments about tackle in the game and that sort of thing. A 180, as is reported on Rugby, his Rugby is 2 PC comments, so he's since rolled back in that. But it does strike me, Quinny, that the importance, people frequently talk about the importance of actions on the pitch, so the players have a responsibility to other players in terms of their tackling technique, but there's also a crucial responsibility to the people who operate around the game to use the right language, which he just didn't.
Yeah, and look, both you guys are in the game, the sports broadcasting game, a long time, and your opinion is just as valid as mine. This is about, for any sport, is player safety. And as a coach, there is a responsibility. Sometimes, and I was there as a player, where you want to go out and say something in the press, you want to go, well, the referee was terrible today, or he shouldn't have given this penalty. You just gotta. What I learned over the years is you gotta be careful and measured, and I think Jordan wasn't measured there. He's obviously reflected on it, and I have a kid playing rugby. Any kids going playing rugby, parents dropping off. It's that they don't want to hear that stuff. They want to hear World Rugby is serious about this. There is concerns, there is safety issues. It's a wonderful game that, you know, my young lad he wants contact. He loves it. I can't take that away from him. People often ask me, are you worried? You'd be nervous in any sport, and I'm kind of a nervous parent about my little fella, but I've had to kind of just step back and let him do his thing, and he just loves the contact. He's only 9.
Where does he get that from, Quinny?
I'm not really sure. But, you know, my point here is messages and awareness are important in sport, John, aren't they? You know, and if we have head people coming out saying, well, this is wrong, the powers that be are trying to do X, and you have someone who has a voice and a strong voice. And I like Jordan, I said it to you last week, he's a great bloke, and maybe he has to learn, and he's come back and rode back in his comments. He's very frustrated his player gets sent off and they lose the game, and it affects the game. It was a wonderful game to watch Wasps and Leicester last week, but you know, down to 14 men, it does affect the game. So he's frustrated, he's angry after the game, but I think the messages around concussion, and I'm very serious about this myself. I was involved in the RFU videos a couple of years ago, not for monetary reasons, but because I was passionate about saying, okay, I've been through 15 years of professional rugby. I'm passionate about where it can, you know, my opinion on where it can be safer. So I got involved in that. And I think we have to, you know, World Rugby, like I said, in 2017, they brought in these protocols. They didn't change any laws, because a high tackle is a high tackle. It always has been. But they brought in the sanctions and the punishments. And referees adhered to that for a number of weeks. At the start in January 2017, they were very strict. And we saw some soft yellow cards for grappling from the side and stuff like that. But it was police probably 6-8 weeks. It was police very strongly, maybe 3 months, and then it was stopped, and it kind of drifted back to interpretation, and he didn't mean that one, and you know, it's just a penalty, give him a warning. It's only a yellow, it shouldn't be a red. And it kind of got into that grey area again of he didn't mean it, the player, and there's no doubt Will Spencer didn't obviously mean to hit the Wasp player with that high tackle at the weekend, but he did, and it's a red card. And if you're going by the letter of the law, and unfortunately rugby has to go by the letter of the law around this area, because it's the message it's sending out. So I'm glad Jordan has kind of, you know, on reflection looked at it, and the player is suspended for 4 weeks. So that says that the referee isn't wrong. You know, they've had a chance to sit down a panel and say, look, he didn't mean it, here are the mitigating factors. The player probably, and they would have said that, but he's 4-week ban. So I'm glad Jordan has come back, and those messages are important that they continue.
Briefly on that, finally, before we're wrapping it, Rob Kitson had written a piece I know in The Guardian during the week suggesting the black card scenario, and I think it's something that Rory
and Rory O'Connor's this morning as well. For me, part of me goes, yeah, you know what, it'll keep the game intact, but another part of me, like, so it'll keep 15 versus 15, as opposed to the G, you know, with the black card and the GA, that maybe it'll work. But part of me then thinks, you know what? Rugby is very technical at times, and I always go back to Joe Schmidt, the way he's a real disciplinarian around the number of penalties these teams give away, and if some kind of interpretation or law change happens in the game, he makes sure that every player knows this inside out, that this is your point of entry in a ruck, and the referees are going to be hot on this, and you could be penalised. And it kind of takes away then, it doesn't punish the team, and it doesn't enable a coach to go, well, your discipline was bad, you cost us the game. And I think you need that ruthless side of it a little bit as well. From a spectator's point of view, obviously I have 15 versus 15, but you know, if we're playing the All Blacks in a World Cup final, Dreamland, and one of them gets sent off, well, we've a better chance of winning. Will we then go and say, well, look, they were able to bring on a player who's just as good? Well, there is that, because it
happens at GA, where there's all that little bit of a sort of bend in the rules.
I do understand that, you know, it'll punish the player more than the team, and I still kind of think that if your discipline is bad on a rugby field, and I was no angel, hands up on that one, and I often got a rollicking off coaches afterwards, and I, you know, gave away a penalty that could have cost us a game or whatever, or got a yellow card. But I think you probably need to keep that scenario there where he knows going out in the field, I can't do this because I'm risking a red card, not just personal punishment, but team could lose, and it's a bigger picture. Now, that sounds severe.
Yeah.
It may work. It may be something that needs to be trialled with a black card, and his day is over and a new guy comes on.
Yeah, let's take a look at the fixtures this weekend. I have to say, Quinny, I'm very concerned about your boys. I've watched them at the weekend. Really impressive with a team that must be close enough. Probably a couple of players to come in, including one of them, CJ Stander, back this week for that game against Cardiff. You must be pretty excited, eh?
I'm very surprised with your words of concern, John. Would you be concerned at that? Like a Connacht man who's transformed himself to Leinster, who likes to criticise my former team, and I know it's only in jest. It's only in jest. I think
must be excited.
I'm excited. I think, look, you can't get too far ahead. Ospreys were poor last week, but the optimism around Joey Carbery, Tyg Byrne.
How's he been received, Joey Carbery, down there?
Unbelievable. Look, I think, and I said this a few times before about Felipe Contepomi, someone who Leinster loved, and he's that real kind of charismatic character. If he ever went to Munster, he'd be a cult hero. This is kind of like, the personalities are different here, but like Munster are so excited, the supporters, because they want success as well, and they've seen how talented he is. He got a standing ovation coming off the field last week. Now, it was tough on Blandel, Keatley, Hanrahan to see that kind of stuff going on, but hopefully
Hanrahan 15 this weekend. It's almost it's almost like they're marking his card at this point. Somebody's got to be ruled out of that conversation.
Yeah, they have to be. And look, we talk about pressure on Liam Sheedy, managers, players. There's pressure on Joey Carbery, but I think he's a very grounded young man, and he brings excitement. So any team that would have got him, if he went to Ulster, they'd be incredibly excited. So he's been very well received, John.
But generally, like the thing about it is, we'll probably end up spending the entire season talking about Joey Carbery and
Munster.
But Munster, I genuinely, looking at them, I know the quality of the opposition was poor, but they look good, they look coherent, they could mix it up a bit. They're rolling maul, I think, got three tries, and we see CJ Stander come back into that squad obviously this weekend, and like, they just look bloody impressive.
When you look at the team now compared to maybe the start of some other seasons, you go, there's depth there, and a lot of the internationals are back with all the provinces, and the challenge for Munster, Ulster and Connacht is there's a gap. Leinster just have an incredibly balanced squad. They were a fantastic year last year, winning the double, and there's a gap to be closed. So I think Munster are probably best placed to squeeze it up a little bit and close it. Will they be good enough to win silverware and win trophies in Europe? On their day, if they get their best team out, they'll be very, very hard to decide to beat. Taute coming back is like a new signing. He starts tonight. Both is a really good player. Chris Farrell, now, I probably mentioned this before, there's a lot of guys we're mentioning are not born and bred in Munster, and someone tweeted me this morning saying, you know, would you be concerned about maybe all the overseas guys in Ulster and in Munster, and there's a few in Connacht as well. Leinster have the least because they're producing incredibly homegrown talent and the numbers and all that kind of stuff, but they've got to evolve, and you know, hopefully that will change in a few years where you can bring homegrown guys in, but success is about now, and they've got to get bums back in seats, and the commercial side of it
if you're saying that sort of down the track, ideally there are more Munster players involved?
Well, look, you can't just, is it short-term pain or long-term gain? It depends. And I think not making quarterfinals of Europe for a couple of years like they did a few years ago, it hits the coffers and it stops maybe development of grassroots and spending money. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword. So, you know, they've assembled a very good squad now. There is still a lot of Munster guys there for sure, but there's a scattering of overseas guys and a South African presence there. That's just the way it is, and I can live with that. I want to see him win and do well again and maybe close that gap. And we saw an incredible semi-final last year in the Pro 14 between Munster and Leinster, and a real bit of bite and energy back in the Inter-Pros in a couple of weeks. So we want all the provinces strong and being competitive. And if you come to knockout stages of Europe, Adrian, and you see Ulster, Leinster, Munster, Connacht in the Challenge Cup, but if you see the three of them in that final 8, well, that's only good for the national game. But look, they have a good side going to Cardiff tonight, and I think they're placed. It's not an easy place to go. Leinster had a tough game, got a good win there a few weeks ago, but I think that's a strong Munster side this early in the season.
Munster are going to win the Heineken Champions Cup is what I'm hearing from you this morning, Quinny.
No, you're not hearing that, Adrian, from me.
Ulster.
They got the semi-finals the last 2 years.
Talk to me about Ulster.
And I think they're a better place to maybe...
That's what I've heard, and I'm sure that's what the audience have heard.
No, I don't want the audience
thinking
that. Leinster are still the best side in
Now
Ireland.
that we've established that, talk to me about Ulster, and you've been very impressed by their start to the season as well.
Impressed with the results, maybe not the performances. Right. I think they've, you know, what happened there last year and the negativity that was coming out there. I know there's a lot of good people up in Ulster Rugby. There was a lot of stuff said. I said it, Draco said it, different people said it. We said what we saw, and at the time,
Did anybody take it to task over that?
They certainly took Draco to task with the basket case thing, and
no, but not even publicly. Like, you know, did you ever get a phone call and say, or do you know?
Privately, privately, people would have kind of, well, the online presence of social media and stuff. I think some people were probably angry and frustrated with what was going on in Ulster anyway. You know, Shane Logan had been there for a long, long time. He made that statement about they're going to be the best club in Europe and the world, and their facilities and all. And in fairness to the guy, he'd done a lot of good stuff there, but ultimately you're judged on performances on the field, and there's a frustration. I tell you go to the old Raven Hill and you get a surge of energy out of the place, the passion that's there for the rugby. So the results this year, given everything that happened last year with John O'Gibbs leaving, there's been a lot of coaches in the last number of years. To win the first 3 games is positivity, and that's what they need. They scraped through against Scarlets, scraped through against Edinburgh, 2 John Cooney-led penalties. They went to South Africa last week and got a win against the Kings. If they can get something against the Cheetahs tonight, another win. If you're 4 from 4 on your return from the first 4 games, it's a positive thing. Now, Dan McFarland, you talk about Johan van Gran coming in midway through last season. You can never underestimate the value of having your coach in early. You have a lot of time in pre-season to have chats with guys, to get to know guys, to watch them closely. So he's come in a little bit late, so he's still probably finding his feet and getting to know the players individually. But, you know, Geordie Murphy, Marty Moore, Will Addison looks a really good player. Right. Someone who, I'm doing a piece tomorrow in the Indo, and one of the questions was, can anyone uncapped player forced themselves into an Irish squad in the World Cup in a year, and he's one I picked because I think I like. What
position is he?
He's full back, centre, winger. He's massive versatility. Joe Schmidt had him in Australia. He actually was holidaying in Australia and trained with Ireland this summer, and the boys were taken away by how talented he was. He's a very good player. He's Irish qualified, and he's a good signing for him. Question marks about the front 5 and that robust kind of aggression that you need in the top end, but I think the signs are good, and you know, it's a positive story so far. But
John
look,
Cooney's impressed you as well, isn't he?
The next couple of weeks in the Inter-Pros in Europe. Next couple of weeks in Europe are going to be very, very. That'll tell a story. John Cooney's a great player. He's someone who can play at 10 as well, and I think he's someone who's potentially could force himself into a World Cup, not just as an ability as a 9, but his versatility to possibly be a 10. And if you look at the last World Cup, Joe Schmidt brought 2 scrum halves and 3 fly halves, and you probably only can bring 5 there in that half-back situation. Cooney's someone who can play 10. So I think it could force him into pushing out one of the fly halves maybe, which could be harsh on a Ross Byrne. Carberry and Sexton will be your first two, but I think, you know, Cooney's a great footballer, and having that kicking ability as well is important for him. So it's a good story so far, and you can only, winning becomes a habit, Adrian, and it builds a bit of feel-good factor within the group as opposed to losing games. So their performances haven't been superb, but it's been positive so far.
Just a lot of kind of talk and supplements about the World Cup because it's a year yesterday.
Yeah.
South Africa, is their resurgence, and Rassie Erasmus, who you know well, is that a worry for Ireland given we could be facing them in the quarterfinals?
Absolutely, John. I think, and it just kind of hit me at the weekend. Geez, if we win the group, if things go well, which we can't underestimate Scotland in our group, or Japan, or Samoa, and people might say you're talking rubbish there, but we saw what the Japs did to South Africa in the last World Cup, and they can tend to surge. They have a lot of New Zealanders and Samoans and people living there in that residency rule. They've benefited very well from that. So they could have a very strong team on home soil. Samoa, depending again, can be very talented. So that groups thing is going to be difficult. But on paper,
we should win the group.
We should win the group, and there's no point in saying it any different. Now, as this things stand with the squad we have, so we win the group and things go according to plan in Group D. Or
New Zealand, South Africa's group.
Yeah, New Zealand, South Africa's group. New Zealand win that group, South Africa second. We have a quarter final against them. And you go, it hit me at the weekend because of Rassie's influence, the way he got to know the rugby situation up here. He'll know a lot of the players, and he's a real motivator. When he came to Munster first, I thought, this guy, his big focus is on team spirit, morale. And that's important in sport because you can have all the talent in the world if guys are not bonding together and getting on well. I remember talking to Vian Dupree, who played for Munster, and I was intrigued by Rassie at the start. What's he like? And he said, when I was at the Cheetahs, he was so focused on families coming together, barbecues, the wives, the girlfriends, the partners, what was happening at home, was everything all right with players? And he really got to know guys that way. And it was a similar thing in Munster. And he's a tough operator as well. So I think he went into a South African situation saying, this thing is a shambles, there's players all over the place, we have a lot of talented athletes, big strong guys, how can I bring them together? And you know, that's the end result. They were hanging on for dear life, they'd only 25% possession, they rode their luck a bit, but that kind of win could galvanise South Africa to become stronger. So yes, John,
and
a major threat.
Is it realistic to expect? We've had an amazing year, Quinny. We've had a Grand Slam win at Twickenham. We've beaten Australia down under. We got 14 months now until the conclusion of the World Cup. Is it realistic to expect and that we're just going to keep this run going through to the Six Nations? And would Joe even want that?
I think we're going to have a blip at some stage, and that sounds a bit pessimistic. Now, to keep a run going like that is phenomenal, and the success we've had, and you know, obviously losing the game, James Ryan lost his first game in professional rugby in Australia, that first test. We're capable of it, you know, there's no doubt, and it's down to a little bit of luck. I'm picking a squad for the paper tomorrow, and genuinely, it's a year out, and you're picking a squad now based on what's happened, what potentially will happen, and the type of characters that you think have this hunger and desire to do something at this World Cup and make sure that their form doesn't dip. And I genuinely, you're leaving out 10, 15 guys who no one in the country would have a problem if they were a starting player. So we've a huge depth, and I think that's one of the massive things. Aside from his coaching ability, Joe's brought through a lot of guys and he's capped a lot of players in the last number of years. He's probably had critics maybe early on about being a bit conservative, but I think he's changed the way we play. He's still quite precise in what we do, but I think to keep that run going is tough in any sport for any team. But we lose one game, I don't think we're going to lose 2 or 3 games and there's going to be any sort of crisis because we have so much depth.
Darren Dahney isn't in agreement. He says, why do we need to have a blip? We should expect consistency on a par with the ABs.
Yeah, I'm not saying we will have a blip. It could happen, no matter how good you are. Sometimes
it's just, is it a worry not to have a blip? Because
we don't want a blip
at the wrong time in the World Cup
quarter
final.
I'd rather have a blip in November.
Yeah.
Playing the All Blacks is always going to be incredibly difficult. But if you were to pick a blip, you know, is it the end of the world if Argentina beat us? Maybe it's a wake-up call that some teams need, as you say. I don't want any blips in the Six Nations, because I think carrying a bit of momentum on from the Six Nations and maybe challenging or like winning the Grand Slam again. We France and England here in Dublin, so I think we've got to think that way. You've the big hitters here. You know, we've been to Cardiff many times, Scotland. It's set up for the Grand Slam year. It's so hard to back it up. But winning a championship, I think, would be important to keep that kind of, we're still here, we're growing. This isn't a case of Ireland dropping off a little bit. But, you know, going back to the domestic stuff, you just look at the players that are coming through from Leinster, the amount of guys they'll have representing that Irish group. There's some young, exciting guys coming out of the rest of the other provinces. Connacht have a couple of good guys coming through. So there's a lot of hunger coming up underneath as well, and guys who want to be in that position. And but sport is difficult to keep and maintain success, you know, no matter how good your team is. But we've the right man in charge, I think, and he'll leave no stone unturned. I guarantee you this is a conversation that the coaches will probably have, that, look, maybe we're going to have a day where the referee goes against us, we miss 2 tackles, 2 teams just play above themselves. So they'll prepare for that, and when you lose a match, it's how you react afterwards.
As Hydrogen points out on YouTube, the ABs just had another blip against South Africa, so they're not without blips themselves. I don't know if you've seen the story. Are you going to Japan?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
You've any tattoos?
You're planning on going swimming or sort of wearing your T-shirt around the park? Probably.
I'm not really sure what you're on about here.
They've decided that because apparently in Japan there's some mafia-style groups down there who are known by their tattoos. So if you've got a tattoo, essentially you're part of this gang. I have one here on my arm. It's a little bit of wire, kind of.
Right. Have you been to Japan, Quinny?
I have, yeah. I was there in 2005, John. We went on a tour with Ireland, the year of the Lions. It was brilliant. It was really intriguing. Is it affordable for your ordinary kind of rugby punter? It's going to be a difficult kind of scenario to get there.
But even getting there, it's going
to be expensive, and but it's a really intriguing place to go, and I love the people are wonderful.
You doing any karaoke?
I'll try a little bit, yeah, no doubt. Will you come out and join me?
But hopefully I'm there.
Yeah, I will be there. And look, going to the World Cups, I was there at a couple, 3 as a player, and it's kind of the pinnacle for players. So it's a long way out, and there's probably no point in getting too excited about it now, because a lot of rugby to be played between now and then. But I just hope this time in 12 months, or just over 12 months, that we're saying, at worst, we got to a semi-final, not
we got to get over that barrier.
Quarter-final thing again, you know.
Quinny, thanks a million. Cheers. Thanks a lot. Quick look at those fixtures as well before we wrap on the rugby this week on Air Sport. Tonight it's that Munster, the Heineken Champions Cup champions in waiting, according to Quinny, off to the Cardiff Blues tonight, 7:35 kick-off there. And it's Leinster up against Edinburgh is the other game on Air Sport tonight. The other fixture is the Cheetahs. That's tomorrow, I should say, yeah. And the Cheetahs Ulster game is tonight in
Bloemfontein, and then Connacht
as well, up against Garland Sports Ground. That's tomorrow evening at 5:15. That's the fixtures this weekend. A couple of them you can catch on Air Sport. Should remind you as well that OTB AM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. I do want to remind you as well that Liam Miller's testimonial match is on next Tuesday at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. The testimonial dinner is on that evening. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff for the game. Will O'Callaghan's going to be down there for Off the Ball. If you missed out on tickets for that game, for the game itself, and it is clearly fully sold out, you can still contribute to the fundraising efforts by taking part in the silent auction. There are signed jerseys from Bobby Charlton, Ronaldo, John Giles as well, concert tickets and plenty more. So get your bids in now at galabid.com/Liam. That's GALA bid.com/Liam. And we have a pair of tickets to give away this morning. We just want you to leave a comment if you've done that. This morning you're in the draw. If you want to get involved, leave us a comment there on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, on the hashtag OTBAM, just so we know that you've entered. And you can retweet us as well on Twitter just to get into that draw. And we'll announce that winner before we wrap here in a little bit. Niall McGrath is on the way, and so that is coming very shortly. John, I think you're going to take your leave as well, if I'm right.
Yeah, I think I'm going to sit this one out, Adrian. I'll let you and I'll get into the brawl in the Off the Ball studio.
Fair enough.
Like, was it Peter Griffin and the chicken?
I don't know the reference, but I mean, I understand roughly where you're at there.
Fighting.
And I'm more the sort of old man shaking his fist at the sky. I'm going to do that in just a couple of minutes' time. Before that, Philip O'Connor was at last night's press conference in Radio City, New York, for OTB AM.
Right. Philip O'Connor in New York at the Radio City Music Hall, where Conor McGregor has just taken on Khabib Nurmagomedov in a press conference. We'll see the fight, of course, on the 6th of October in Las Vegas, Nevada. With me is Chuck Mindenhall from MMAfighting.com. Chuck, can I ask you, what did you think of that performance there by McGregor?
It was a little weird, wasn't it? With this dark cathedral behind us and not a lot of noise. We're used to seeing Conor. Every time he speaks, there's a big riotous kind of uproar. But once you got past that, I thought it was very interesting, man, because you saw Conor starting to work away at the mental side of the fight, and it is always interesting to see how he psychologically controls the narrative in these types of situations.
Yep. It was pretty amazing, of course, because there was no fans here tonight. We're used to seeing him in Madison Square Garden or the T-Mobile Arena, where there's a whole bunch of people there cheering for Conor, flags waving, that kind of thing, and Conor playing to that audience, but there was no audience here tonight. Chuck, we had everything from whiskey on stage to geopolitics. Like, it looks like Conor thought out his lines before he hit that.
He did. You know, I was wondering if he might come into this a little bit more subdued, just given the situation, but he was not like that at all. He kind of he showed up in rare form, really. I thought it was like watching a bowstring being pulled back for a long time, 2 years, I guess, and then being let go. Clear bad blood between these two guys, and I think that just about anything he thought could get under his skin, we saw at least a little example of that up there. And I have to admit, there was a couple of times where you saw Khabib kind of reacting in the way I think that he wants. So again, it was just the psychological thing, and Conor's a master at it, man. We saw that again today.
Do you think that kind of thing really bothers a fighter of that caliber? I know Khabib is sort of new to the really top echelons of the sport here, but I mean, do you really think that gets under his skin, or is he just going to go back to the gym and take it out on the mats tonight?
He's a tough one because he's very stoical at all times. You can't really get a read on him, and I do think he lets a lot of stuff just fly right by him because he gets the chance to have the fight. He knows he can do what he wants to do in the fight. That comes up, but I will say that Conor's a master at finding the thing that's going to kind of peeve you a little bit, and then peeling that back, and then sticking his finger, and then just doing it again and again, and then just, this was what was going on in this one. I felt like he was gauging a little bit, like not unlike a first round where you kind of gauge an opponent to see what the game plan is. I think he was gauging him a little bit early, and as soon as he felt like he got some momentum in the smack talk game, man, he was all over it. And I bet there was a little warmth in his belly too, because he's certainly up there doing some shots of whiskey, so that helps.
I've met many of them through my years. A man who grows in numbers, but on his own, and when confronted in a similar situation, cowers away. And that's what you saw with that little shite on the bus over there. He shit his jocks after doing something to his own countryman that had nothing got to do with anything. And that's it. I came back for the love of fighting and the love of war, and this I am going to truly, truly love, putting a bad beating on this little glass jaw rat. Smash me! Smash me! You say send location. Here it is, right here in front of you. I'm right in front of you. Did you not see me outside the bus? No? Did you not see me right in front of you outside the fucking bus? I showed you my hands, no weapons. The first thing when I showed up at that bus, I showed not my hands to let it know I come here unarmed, no weapons. Step off the bus. You talk the big game, now I'm here. He done fucking nothing. He sat and took a shit on that bus. Hid and cowered behind fucking women and caused what happened to happen. So that's fucking that. So here's my location, you little fool. Right in front of you. Do something about it. Do something about it.
This is one press conference is all we're doing here. Is that going to be enough to sell this fight to the American public, what we've seen here this evening?
Well, I'll tell you what, I saw a couple of people tweeting that there were over 500,000 people watching on a live stream, specific live stream, and just knowing that, you can tell that this thing is pretty seismic in terms of what is going on. I think this particular matchup is fascinating, and I don't know how much they have to sell it, and I think that this actually will translate very well. Now, is it trending towards 2.5 million? That's kind of an ambitious number. I don't know if this would be enough. We're going to have to wait and see kind of how Fight Week plays out. But this was a very good start. I think that, honestly, I think that just getting Conor, his voice back into the mix and getting Khabib a little bit in there, that's going to carry a long way.
Whatever about the whiskey, we've seen vintage Conor McGregor here tonight in Radio City Music Hall in New York. And you can follow all the coverage live from now until October 6th, offtheball.com.
How's Noah, huh? Yeah, shut your mouth. Never speak about me. Ever in your life. Watch yourself around me. Because you'll be out of here quick. Here, hold on. Let me get my clothes and my belt and my suit. Oh, this is my brother.
Yeah, that is the fanfare wrapping up in New York last night. Some tasty language there. It was generally the way things. Niall McGrath, good morning to you.
Adrian, how are you?
I'm good. I'm going to start off by saying we're on opposite sides of the fence on this one. You're, to be fair, an MMA reporter, and you're all over this stuff, and so we're going to get into some of the good stuff. For me, watching it, and I'm not particularly an MMA fan anyway, I'm not sort of it's not a sport category anywhere near that sort of thing, but I just thought last night was OTT fakery.
Fakery? How so?
Just the McGregor level of hyped up nonsense that had begun before he even got himself on the stage. He was straight over and I'm going to be aggressive and I'm going to be in your face. It was this contrived level of anger.
That's what he does to get in guys' heads. And to me, it worked last night. You might have seen the stare down. Khabib took a step or two back. There was, we just showed at the end, there was a bit of shouting between Conor and Khabib's agent. This is what he does. This is what he wants to do. He's gone in there last night, and in fairness to Conor, he does it with all his opponents. He's done his due diligence on Khabib's history and his past, and some of the links, and I think we know some of the links. Razman Kadyrov, the Chechen dictator, there's been links there. He's a guy who's strongly linked in the world of mixed martial arts. He was in Moscow last weekend for the UFC event. A guy, I wouldn't particularly like involved with the sport. So Conor's using every angle, I believe, to get underneath Khabib's skin, and for me it worked last night. Yeah. And another thing, I spoke to... None
of which would be required, by the way, if he was going to dominate Khabib in the level, to the level that he says himself that he will. I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do the other thing to you. None of that would be required if, if he actually believed he was going to...
Well, I just think it's, he realises that he has to sell a fight as well. He has to get people interested and invested in the fight. And the more people that are interested and invested in the fight, and the more people who are buying the pay-per-view, there's more money going in Conor's pockets. There's more money going in Conor's pockets.
By the way, that's exactly what I believe. That it's just hype, and fakery is the word I'm using, and I'm going to stick with it. Last night, on the basis of selling a few more pay-per-views, and they're trying to sell 2.5 million of them, by all accounts.
Well, that's what Dana said it was trending at last night. So I look at the numbers last night from what the UFC's YouTube page was doing. I think there was 500,000 watching last night at one point, over 500,000. That is phenomenal, just for a press conference alone. And if you look at the views, I think this morning it's up, maybe Tommy might tell us, it's up near 3 million, I think, which is insane, within 6 hours of the press conference ending. But at the end of the day, Conor knows what he's doing in terms of selling fights. And, to get any sort of psychological advantage on your opponent in mixed martial arts is massive. And I think we saw that especially with Jose Aldo. I remember being in the convention centre in town and seeing Jose Aldo, 2 yards away interviewing the guy. And there was literally tears of emotion in his eyes. That's what Conor wants. It's every advantage for the fighter. So it's a little bit of both that he knows he's selling the fight. He's trying to get underneath his skin. It's obviously Conor's gone in and he's done his due diligence, as I said, and looked up all this stuff about the dictator and Kadyrov and some of the personal past history of Khabib, and it's riled him up a little bit.
Let's hear a bit from Conor McGregor. He says money isn't the primary motivating factor behind his decision to return to the octagon. He's going to make his return, obviously, to the UFC after this 2-year break when he takes on Khabib Nurmagomedov at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It's going to be it'll be the first of a newly signed 6-fight deal. More details on that with Niall in just a little bit. As we said, they're aiming for 2.5 million pay-per-view buys. 30-year-old says he has enough cash, so this fight is personal.
I came back for the love of this, to come and shut this man up. A little rat, a little weasel, a little hard man in groups. I've met many of them through my years. A man who grows in numbers, but on his own, and when confronted in a similar situation, cowers away. And that's what you saw with that little shit on the bus over there. He shit his jocks after doing something to his own countryman that had nothing got to do with anything. And that's it. I came back for the love of fighting and the love of war, and this I am going to truly, truly love, putting a bad beating on this little glass jaw rat.
Yeah, I mean, he shot his jocks, is proper Oscar Wilde stuff from Conor McGregor last night. Plenty of commentary coming in. Aviend on YouTube says it's about selling the fight, and if he can get Khabib
That's
emotional.
a good point, because I think here, especially in Ireland, we take that kind of thing too personal. I think the American audience realise and understand that we're selling a fight. And I always say to fighters, younger guys coming up, and I often talk to them, I go, why don't you put yourself out there a little bit more? It's a fight game. Look at Conor last night. He spoke about Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier. 2 guys he's been in there with before.
Oh, and he's got utter respect for them.
Yeah.
Great guys, super guys. As soon as the match gets made, he's...
But that's it.
I know, but it's fake.
Well, I wouldn't call it fake. It's
made up, it's contrived.
But he's using that to his advantage to get underneath their skin in the build-up to the fight. As I mentioned with Jose Aldo, it's all part of the fight game. And guys...
It's contrived, though. I get that. I get the fight game. I get it all day long. For me...
What's the problem in Ireland about it? That's what I don't understand. Why can't we just accept that this is part of the build-up and part of the fight?
Last night's, to me, felt, and it might have been the fact that there were no fans in there, it might have been the fact that Khabib wasn't really buying it and was sort of cool as you like, but so he was having to get... I think
he was, because he walked off.
But he was having to get outraged. McGregor was having to get outraged at somebody who was just sitting there pretty peacefully.
That's it, that's part of the game.
Yeah. No, I get that, but it's contrived, is what I'm saying. So, no fans allowed in, just a part of the build-up. They used... the hand trolley incident at the bus, which I think sort of surprised a few people.
I wasn't surprised. I called that, I think, when I was in Brooklyn, and I think it was on with you on the morning show here. And, that's Dana White for you. Anything, 24 hours is a long time in the world of Dana White, because, it was the worst thing in the world at the time, and then 24 hours later, it wasn't as bad as it was. Yeah. They were always going to do it for me. I'm not shocked about them using the dolly, the hand truck in the build-up and the promotion for this fight. And, we haven't had as long as possibly we would have liked to, in the build-up of the fight. That's why there's only been one press conference, and it's, we probably won't see anything else now till the fight in a couple of weeks. Yeah. But, that's the reason. I think they used it to try and hype it up as much as they can, and it was always going to be the case for me.
Darren Dohney on YouTube says, I'll never forget the faces of Mendes and Alvarez before those fights.
That's it.
Beaten before they stepped into the octagon.
That's it. You'll see Conor, a whole different Conor on fight night. Cool, calm, collected, as he always is when he's walking down to the octagon. It's it's a total 180 turnaround in the way he conducts himself between the press conferences and actually the fight, and when he's in the octagon.
Can I ask you about the one thing that jumped out for me last night? I by the way, I'm not in the habit of watching these press conferences, so I'm coming here as sort of fresh Joe into the conversation, so that's where I'm at, right? But it struck me watching the press conference last night that the quality of journalism, I'm not going to say that exists. Let me finish. I'm not saying the quality of journalism that exists around MMA, because I don't know enough about it to make that statement. But watching last night, first question, thanked the fighters for turning up to the press conference. Twice he was congratulated on his whiskey brand, including an Irish journalist from West Cork, and another guy thanking Dana White for taking the event to New York. It did seem to be lacking in good.
There's a reason, man. There's a big Bellator event on in the US this weekend, and a lot of the top journalists would have been at that. That is the issue.
So you're saying that's untypical?
That's untypical. You're always going to get one or two guys in there.
There were fans, essentially, right? Like these guys.
Yeah. I think, the UFC in terms of, the press conference last night, there was a lot of emails, being sent. I was getting them, see if you're confirming or whatnot. It was trying to, obviously, unsettle Bellator's event this weekend. Their competitors. That's on the other side of the pond. And it's a big event in terms of a lot of ex-UFC guys. But I agree, some of the questions were terrible. But if you look at the piece we just put on there, one of the best riders in the world, Chuck Minenhall, there was 3 to 4 of the regular heads there, and Ariel was doing his own thing with Chael Sonnen.
From off the top of my head, was stand out particularly good. If it was the same guy that I'm thinking of.
Chuck.
Particularly
Chuck's
good.
fantastic. He's a fantastic rider. Now, listen, there's a wealth of absolutely fantastic mixed martial arts journalists in the world. And another one I recommend our viewers and listeners to look up is a guy called Karim Zidan. He's some very interesting lines on the links, as I said, about Kadyrov to mixed martial arts. We're actually going to have him on the Off the Brawl show in a couple of weeks' time. So just a little bit of a different sort of angle on it. But there is plenty of guys, and I think just last night, listen, you always get that at press conferences, and there's not a huge amount of time as well that you're going to get for everyone to get around the questions. But some of the questions were stupid. I've never even heard of that guy from West Cork.
I know, So, but it was clear. Look, as I said, I clearly say that it wasn't a judgment about.
And another thing, what often happens at these events, one or two obviously fans get in and they blag their way in and get a question from them.
Yeah, fair enough. Somebody on YouTube says that Ireland can't accept the hype because we've grown up watching the pantomime of the WWE build up at stupid o'clock in the morning. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to labour the point. That was my take on it.
Boxing has gone down that route over the last number of months as well.
But I'm not saying that this is an MMA or UFC only thing. I'm just saying that was the evidence last night. Let's talk a little bit about the fight. So he's been gone for 2 years and he's obviously had other interests to do, and he's been off making a bit of cash. And I actually thought that the branding, I thought the whiskey thing is genius.
Yeah, fantastic.
Like, absolutely genius.
Fantastic.
He's been working with a guy so he set up his own sort of distilling label. He's working with a guy who's former Guinness, who's been working with Bushmills, and this is great.
He doesn't like Jameson apparently anymore after last night.
I think Jameson had probably done all right out of it too, getting their name mentioned in front of 3 million people.
Exactly. Fair play to Conor. He's put a lot of work into that, and I think it goes back a couple of years. They've been looking at this idea, and the interesting thing is the news broke last night from ESPN.com. Dana O'Gorman that Conor signed a new 6-fight deal with the promotion. Listen, the stipulations and whatever else you have in these contracts, you can forget the 6 fights, by the way, obviously. Yeah, but what he's done with the whiskey is, for the next 6 fights, if he does fight the 6 fights, he'll have the whiskey brand in the canvas of the octagon. So, genius stuff from Conor McGregor in terms of mixed martial arts. There's so many stipulations in these contracts and clauses that, there could be, a review clause after 1 fight, after 2 fight, renegotiate clause. We don't know the details of the contract yet, but I think it's the UFC trying to just maybe pin down Conor for 1 more after this. And, there is plenty of fights to make, even as I said last week, the co-main event there on UFC 229. Tony Ferguson, a guy who's supposed to fight Khabib a number of times, they've all had a bit of history of trash talk, so there's definitely a narrative.
You look forward to another press conference, what you're saying.
And we've the Diaz and Poirier fight coming up, UFC 230. Both guys obviously fought Conor before. So, rematches galore, new matches to make. So, listen, as far as I'm concerned, there is 6 fights to make for Conor, but whether we're going to see it or not, listen, very unlikely.
John Tiswell on YouTube says Khabib will pull out, too proud to take a beating.
It's a worry for me, the weight, and I've said it, and I don't think it's really been talked about an awful lot coming to this fight. He's a big 155er. He missed weight. He's supposed to fight Tony Ferguson about 16 months ago. He had to pull out the night before due to weight cutting issues. He missed weight in 2013, I think it was. Listen, let's just hope he can get down to weight and on point and not have any issues. But still, we'll have to wait till fight week. But listen, fingers crossed it does happen. I don't want to really put a jinx on it.
There was a bit of forward and back about the various styles, and I think McGregor was sort of trying to undermine his wrestling style or his grappling style or whatever it was. Who wins this, and what's the style match?
Khabib all day. Conor wants to keep it on the feet. It's a classic striker versus grappler matchup. But the interesting thing for me, and I think it's along the lines of what Conor was saying in the press conference last night. At one point, he goes, you want a real fight? He more or less is trying to taunt Khabib into standing with him. That's what I took for it. I spoke to Khabib's coach a number of weeks ago, Javier Mendez from AKA head coach at that gym. And a problem for Khabib has been the mentality and the mindset of actually sticking to a game plan that his corner have implemented. And then we've seen that in the Michael Johnson fight. We saw it last time out against Ali Akinta. He tends to want to stand with guys when clearly it's not his strength. Everyone knows where Khabib's strength is. And I think that's what Conor is doing, is trying to taunt him into stand, make this so personal, as we said. That goes back to the trash talk. And when you can engage someone that doesn't stick to their game plan, that's a positive for Conor McGregor, in my opinion. And Javier Mendez openly admits to his coach that they've had problems with Khabib sticking to this plan. So it's an issue. It's a big issue for me.
There was a lot of stuff about the bus, obviously, last night, a lot of forward and back about, you took a shit on the back of the bus and why didn't you, I was standing outside. Like, he made this big play about sort of, I came up and I showed you I had no weapons, obviously before he picked up a giant weapon and threw it at the bus. But it seems like there isn't going to be any more press conferences now. Is that that's it?
There's a deep narrative behind that, and I think Dana said it was dark last night. I got the same lines, that it is personal, and I think it stems back to the Artem Lobov incident. That's obviously why Conor came to New York. Funny enough, Artem Lobov, he gave me a lift from the airport to the hotel, and it happened 5 minutes later after I'd literally got out.
Wow.
So there was a big group that surrounded Artem. There was words exchanged, but we never actually got to the bottom of what happened there. And I think there's a lot of narratives, as I said, there, secrets that we're not going to know about going into this fight. I think that's what's even more intriguing about it. You heard at the end of the press conference last night, Conor making remarks to Khabib and to Khabib's agent, Ali Abdelaziz. So it's fascinating. Ali's a guy as well who's apparently there's going to be some documentary on his past. Quite an interesting past.
McGregor was talking about how he was asked about how the Mayweather fight, and he said he had learned from that, and we'd see sort of how he had learned from that in the fight. So in terms of those styles, and you're saying that McGregor wants to stand him up, what are you suspecting he might have learned from that, or
I'd say more cardio.
Right.
Just solidly just boxing, throwing his hands for 11 rounds in that fight. That'll work in Conor's favour, definitely, in this fight. We've seen Conor, maybe slump a little bit midway through fights. We saw it against Diaz, and also we saw it against Floyd Mayweather. It's an issue that they're trying to address in the McGregor camp. But in terms of stand-up, is there a better striker in mixed martial arts than Conor McGregor? Not for me.
Okay. And who wins it? We sort of touched on this a bit earlier on. What's your...
I think the more the fight goes, I'll have changed my mind probably next week, going into this fight again.
Good,
but,
that's good.
Originally Conor, and then the more I've seen, the more I've thought about the fights I've watched back, spoken to both camps, I am favouring Conor to win this fight at the moment. I don't think it's going a distance.
Right.
I think Conor, possibly might finish this fight in 2. That's my gut feeling at the moment. But listen, as I said, it could change next week.
That does suggest a good level of dominance on McGregor's side, that he's got the better of this guy. Where is he based, Niall? Is he going to be based down in Vegas now, or what's his plan for the
I haven't been onto the camp, but there wouldn't be much point going home now.
Yeah,
so
stay over there
I'd imagine he'd fly down to Las Vegas within the next day or 2. I know Owen Roddy is his striking coach is flown over to the US, so it would make no sense to come back to Ireland, and I'm sure they'll be down in Vegas within the next couple of days.
Will this be the last run of it, do you think? This sort of, if it is a 6 fights or whatever number of fights that is this his last?
Yeah, I can't, there's too much money, and I'm not even sure the UFC can potentially keep up with the dollars that Conor is going to probably be making outside of the octagon. And another thing I want to pick up on, because we don't often, a lot of mixed martial arts fighters, especially Conor McGregor, you don't often see the positive side. I didn't see it mentioned a lot in the print media this week. Was the fact about the whiskey. For every case he sells up to $1 million, he's given $5 to first responders in the US. So I think that was a pretty decent gesture from Conor.
Good, yeah, good. A good way to leave it after all my negativity, Niall. Is that what you're doing?
There we go, yeah.
That's what you're saying. That's fair enough. There's the proper number 12. Whiskey is to do with the Dublin postcode. Is what I'm.
There we are, yeah, Crumlin on the postcode. So. Listen, great idea. Fair play to him for getting that going. He is a businessman, on and off, in and out of the octagon, should I say. Interesting times ahead, I think, the next couple of weeks. And we've lots coming up as well on the new Off the Broad.
Yeah, what's the next instalment?
The MMA one is kicking off on, I think, Wednesday night. We're going to stream the show. So we've lots of stuff, obviously, leading up to the fight in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks' time. Plenty of reaction throughout the card. Some of the top names in the world of mixed martial arts will be joining us, so do stay posted for that.
If you're looking for a crank to come in and sort of give the optics.
I will, yeah, no problem. We might get into fisticuffs next time.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Friendly fisticuffs. Niall, thanks a million for coming in. Enjoyed that. Thanks a lot. Plenty more as well from Niall over the next couple of weeks in the lead into that fight. That's it on the MMA for the minute. Our new NFL show as we sign off for today is live across Off the Ball every week. Here's Cian Fahey with Ger on the Patriots playing the long game.
Are they realistic contenders to win the division? Like, are what we're seeing from the Patriots something that you'd be thinking, over the course of a season, perhaps this Patriots squad is not as good as the previous Patriots teams that we've seen reach Super Bowls and win them?
Absolutely. We knew this coming in. You went through that roster, the talent is not there. But it is going to change significantly over the next couple of weeks. Josh Gordon being there, assuming he stays on the field, which I think is a fair assumption. The Browns gave up on Josh Gordon last week, but everyone kind of assumed, there was a suspension coming. But when the actual details came out, it kind of seems like the Browns just bungled this. It seems like they messed up what they were doing and they overreacted to him having a hamstring issue that he might not have even had. He might have been trying to force his way out of there. And we can criticise an individual player for doing that, but the way the Browns have been run the last couple of years, I don't blame them. Hugh Jackson and Greg Williams and everyone else there is running that team into the ground. So when Gordon gets to the Patriots, I assume he's going to play. And when Julian Edelman comes back in 2 weeks, that's going to completely change the identity of their offense. Because Chris Hogan's going to go from being their number one receiver, too big of a role for him, not something he can do, to being their third choice or being their fourth choice when you include Gronk. And the other thing about this is Gordon is a perfect complement to Edelman. This is a little bit like, I'm not going to say it's exactly like, because obviously these are high standards, but it's a little bit like Randy Moss and Wes Welker working together and Dante Stallworth as the third receiver from that 2007 or 2018, whichever year it was. The beauty of it is Gordon's going to be the big play threat. He's going to stretch the field. They're not going to ask him to do a whole lot besides run post routes, corner routes, deep sideline routes, and shallow crossing routes. So they'll keep him away from the middle of the field or working from the slot, working option routes. Edelman will do all of that, and he'll have more space to do it now because defenses have to focus on Gordon. This is a great move for the Patriots, and I know we have this tendency to just praise everything the Patriots do, but this one really, really is because they haven't even given up an actual draft pick. They've given up a 5th round pick, but they get a 7th back if Gordon doesn't play enough. So basically what they've given up is about 60 to 80 places in the draft at a point in the draft when the difference between a 5th and 7th is negligible anyway. So they've really given up nothing.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.